Hello, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to the January 23, 2019 meeting of the Wakefield School Committee. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and as we do, invite everyone to join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Also, as we do start every meeting, I'd like to read the mission statement. The vision of the Wakefield Public Schools is to graduate students who are confident, lifelong learners, who are respectful and caring members of their community. Our mission is to prepare students for college, career, and community by providing rich and challenging curriculum, high-quality instruction, and educational experiences that meet their individual needs and interests. Before we enter into the public comment period, I would like to make a couple of comments on myself, if I may, with the committee's indulgence. We have a couple of, I think, what would be some busy agenda items this evening, namely the high school program of studies and the Blattsfield presentation. And in conversation with the superintendent earlier tonight, there are going to be some things that, with the committee's indulgence, we're going to be taking off the agenda to allow time for a full and robust conversation around certainly those issues that I'm sure some members of the community are here to discuss and to share thoughts and ideas with us. We want to make sure that there's enough time to be able to do that. That's the first thing I wanted to make note of. And secondly, also, we're going to be taking off tonight's agenda as a motion and voting item the topic of the high school program of studies for next school year. We will discuss it. We will have the presentation as planned from the high school administration, complemented by the superintendent, allowing some conversation to occur. But I think it's more than fair to say that part of the conversation which we want to hear, we want to participate in, and we want to make sure is fair and is complete. I think that it may be premature this evening to have the school committee actually vote on the program of studies as being presented. With that in mind, I certainly want to also make note that tonight will not be the last opportunity for some conversation around this. It will be our intention to have a vote on the program of studies for next school year at our next scheduled school committee meeting, which is February 12th. In the meantime, the superintendent and I have also discussed and asked that the administration host a forum for concerned parents and community members around some of the changes that are being recommended, some of the proposals, and to have a more in-depth opportunity outside the trappings of the formality of a school committee meeting to be able to discuss some of the educational values and concerns that are both being recommended by our educational leadership team, as well as concerns that parents and community members may have. So I wanted to say that up front. Are there any thoughts or concerns from members of the committee about those sort of two announcements? Okay. With that in mind, let's proceed to the agenda as published. Item number 4, public comment period. Any member of the public is welcome to come up and introduce themselves and speak about any item that is on tonight's agenda or that may not be on tonight's agenda.
Susie Bayer?
Yep, just one more thing, Susie, if I may.
Yeah.
One of the things that we typically have as part of our public participation policy is we ask people for a limited amount of time. We certainly don't ever want to cut anyone off. I, as chair, don't keep a clock or anything like that, but we just ask people to be mindful of the time that others may also have. And sometimes if points get are repetitive or redundant, that may or may not be necessary. But certainly, that's not to say that people should not have an opportunity to say what they would like to share. Susie, welcome.
Thank you. So I am here with the plan to read an email that I sent to you guys a couple of hours ago with about 50 signatures of parents who were concerned about kind of the process that was going to take place tonight. I am still going to read the email because I think it's important for people who don't know kind of the full picture of what is happening, understand what some of those concerns were and the fact that 50 people signed an email in the last 24 hours about the concern. I completely and totally appreciate the very quick response from you, Tom, and for you guys taking our recommendation or suggestion, request to put off voting. And I think that that's absolutely the right thing to do. I am really looking forward to the presentation tonight by Amy to learn a little bit more about this particular topic, which was really all I was trying to bring out in this statement, which is, wasn't super thrilled with the process as it was going to take place and now it's going to be changed, so I appreciate that. But I am going to go ahead and read it. I'm here representing a group of parents that are concerned about a possible vote that might be happening tonight that includes the leveling of 9th grade ELA classes and is part of the listed item on the agenda referred to as the presentation on the Wakefield Memorial High School Program of Studies for next year. The group I represent anticipate that Principal McLeod will be providing a great presentation later tonight as part of this agenda item and will share with us all of her thoughts on the changes and how they would improve our students' learning experience, including moving the 9th grade ELA to one leveled class versus offering an honors section as has been done in the past. I'm going to caveat right there that it sounds like I have misunderstood that. So I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about exactly how this is going to work tonight. Since we haven't heard the presentation yet, we can't understand the rationale behind the decision. It's our understanding that the rationale was shared at the 8th grade orientation last Thursday night, and that some parents have raised concerns about this change to you, school committee members, directly. And yet, from what we can tell, there's been little communication about this recommendation to the broad constituents of the public schools. And it's unclear if the feedback given at the orientation last week is part of the presentation tonight or not. There's a couple things that we do know. This was an agenda item on the January 8th meeting. It was also expected to be voted on that night, and that got moved to tonight. As of 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon on the town website, the only materials published about that were the 2 pages from the agenda on the 8th, the agenda for today, no supporting materials, so we couldn't even get an understanding of what potentially the slides and the presentation was going to include. What is problematic is the only time to comment is now, prior to the presentation. So if you guys were to have taken the vote, there wouldn't have been an opportunity to hear feedback from parents. Clearly, there are some concerns about this from parents, both that have 8th graders going into 9th grade, as well as those who have younger children. This was recommended. This change was recommended a few years ago, and the change was not made after a concern was raised by parents, and probably for other reasons. And it seems that you guys were planning to take a vote tonight, which we now know is not going to happen. We, the names listed below, respectfully ask you, the school committee members, do not accept the program of studies as presented tonight. We believe that the recommendation for the 9th grade ELA leveling and potentially other recommendations in this presentation require more discussion. It may be that at the end of this evening's meeting, people will feel good about the recommendations included and will encourage the school committee to accept it. But if that's not the case, we ask that a session be scheduled with parents to hear feedback, and that feedback be shared with the school committee, and we ask that the committee to delay this motion. These changes potentially impact the number of families who haven't had the opportunity to learn more about the recommendations being made. Let's give them the opportunity to hear Principal McLeod's presentation tonight and then provide their thoughts on those recommendations before deciding to approve them. And then I have a list of a lot of parents who raised their concerns. A number of them were supposed to show up tonight, and I think that they decided that because of the parent forum that you kind of suggested, Tom, that they decided to kind of hold those thoughts and hear the presentation tonight before kind of weighing in, which I think is how we would want this to happen. So I don't have anybody here with me. but there were lots of people kind of interested in the topic and the discussion, and again, I appreciate you responding very quickly and reacting to our request to hold off on the vote. Thank you.
We just want to let you know that you do have a group of parents waiting outside.
Ah.
You coming here, but you do have the support and helping.
So it sounds like there's some parents outside.
Yeah, we felt that you were ably representing us, but there's.
Okay. There are people out there.
Awesome. Okay, anyone else? Public participation. People coming down the hall?
I don't know, I'm not sure if they,
I think they said that.
I'm not sure what's happening here.
They felt this was ably represented.
Yeah?
This is public comment, so if anybody else wants to speak.
Anyone?
There's a couple minute delay, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have confusion. Do you want me to go out there and see if anybody else wants to make a statement very quickly?
Certainly. Absolutely. I suppose, Mr. Sableton, there's nothing worse than dead air, which I could juggle or perhaps tell a witty story.
We're good. I guess they thought that the room was full.
Okay.
Actually, Tom, I wouldn't mind
Oh, certainly, please.
a question.
Please.
I don't know if this works like town meeting, 220 Main, Doug Butler, 220 Main Street. I think in terms of our understanding of this notion of, having multi-level learning in the 9th grade and in freshman class, it really, I think it seems like an exceptionally well-intentioned idea and proposal. And it seems like it works really well, especially to reduce inequity across learning and across across development. But really it seems like it's possibly an ill-fitting approach for here because we don't have multiple different middle schools feeding into the high school. We have the vast preponderance of our students all come from the same middle school, so have the same learning environment. So have the ability to determine whether or not they're appropriately measured. And so this notion of having multi-level learning, wonderful idea. I think it works really well in your bigger city environments where you have multiple different middle schools that might be all at different levels, pushing into a single high school and wanting to give opportunities to possibly the students who didn't have, exceptional teachers in the middle school. And so I think that is my concern, is that it seems it's a great idea and great in theory, but I think implementing it here in Wakefield in a smaller system with a single middle school feeding into a single high school, I think that's one of my areas of concern, because it's probably unnecessary here, and it probably then impairs the ability of the higher level learners. Anyhow, that's all I have. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Butler. Anyone else wish to speak? Seeing none. Okay, we shall move on. Student Advisory Council. Please, welcome.
Gonna need a microphone.
Just grab it for you.
Hello.
This week at the high school, it's midterms week, so it's a little bit different than usual. We're halfway done, so we have 3 more tests left, so Friday we'll only have 1, and there's 2 more tomorrow. Every single day we get out at 11:45 this week, so it's helpful for studying purposes. Registration for AP exams for May are ending this Friday, so everybody's trying to get those forms in. The Social Awareness Club is collecting donations for the homeless, and it's called Care Bags, and those seem to be doing really well. And we also did a giving tree during the holiday season, and it was a huge success, so I think we'll continue to do that. For sports purposes, the boys track team did win the league champions, and the girls team did very well, so track's very excited. The gymnastics team is also doing very well, and they have a really big meet February 11th if people wanted to support. There's a big varsity basketball for boys and girls, and that's happening in Watertown on Friday. And there's also a varsity hockey game at Woburn this Saturday, too. And it seems that the sports teams are doing very well, which is great. And everybody loves supporting, especially this year. It seems like a ton of people are going to all these events, and there's always a big red sea. And even though it's a busy time for like academics, the sports seem to really be doing well. So yeah, everybody seems to be happy.
That's wonderful. Anyone have any questions or comments for the? Yes.
Where
Amy.
is the gymnastics meet?
Gymnastics, I
Do you
can
know?
double check right now actually, but I'm pretty sure I can double check for sure.
Okay.
But I'll let you know.
Thank you.
Definitely February 11th.
Okay.
Great, great, okay. Well, thank you very much. As always, it's great to hear from the high school student leadership, so thank you very much, and good luck with the rest of the finals. I certainly wanted to be able to give our student representative an opportunity to get her comments and thoughts in. What I would like to do at this time, without objection, would be to take out of order the principal's presentation on the program of studies, to not have too much time. So between some of the public comments that we've heard and some of the thinking that's probably going around the table and going around the room. So I'd like to, without objection, I'd like to take that out of order and turn it over to the superintendent to introduce the presentation. Mr. Lyons?
I'm sorry. So we'd like to invite Amy and AJ to the table, please. And they'll kind of share what's happening with the program of studies and the changes that are proposed for this year.
And welcome, and thank you both for coming this evening and for making making all the difficult choices and recommendations. We appreciate that. We know it's not easy work. We know that the educators, from the administrators to the department heads to the teachers, put an awful lot of time into making recommendations, and it's not without thought and energy and proper vetting. So we very much appreciate the recommendations that you make throughout the year, not just this evening.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
also appreciate Mr. Beebe's warrior pride.
That's right. The Red Sea is here as well.
Yeah,
Exactly right.
the old man in the sea.
So thank you for this opportunity. We appreciate the time to talk about the program of studies. Before we talk about the program itself, I do want to talk about the process just for a minute, just to clarify for everyone how this works. I think it's really important to understand that this work starts with the teachers in their departments. It really is a bottom-up process where we rely on the insight, the expertise, and the experience of the teachers and the teacher leaders, who are the department coordinators and the curriculum coordinators. And thinking about their work in front of kids every day, thinking about how these courses are addressing the needs of these learners and what we need to do differently in subsequent years to better reach the needs of our learners. So they work on these ideas for any changes, deletions, and additions, which we'll talk about tonight, really starting after around November through December. So the departments are working on this. It's then brought to Mr. Beebe and I in a collaborative conversation, again, with the department coordinator, the curriculum coordinator, and the two of us. So we did this a little differently this year, who are bringing forth the ideas that have kind of been fleshed out in the department meetings or with groups of teachers who will be teaching these courses. So the document that you received reflects those changes. So first, what we'd like to do is have Mr. Beebe take you through some of the changes briefly, and then we'll dig in particularly to the ELA piece. But we did want to give time to some of the changes overall, because we're excited about some of these new courses and some tweaks we've made to this book.
Thank you, Amy. So here it is, English Language Arts right off the top, Unleveling English 9. This is a proposal in the English department. Another change in the English department is we're proposing changing creative writing from a semester class to a full year course. And because of the popularity of the creative writing class that we run right now, we are proposing offering a creative writing 2 class. The students who are taking the class right now are very interested in continuing that process, and the English department is willing to see if it sells. And if we can put staffing forward to that, we will. They also have come up with another elective called Contemporary American Thought. We've tried to run a course called Social Networking, which is an evolution of public speaking over time that really hasn't held its own. Mr. Drinkwater teaches a class in dystopian literature called Dark Days that's very popular, so we thought we could put together some genres of writing and reading that students would take to that, so we're replacing that with this Contemporary American Thought course. In the world language area, we are proposing eliminating Spanish 5 CP and French 5 CP. That is paying homage, I guess, to students who get to Spanish 5, that we would like to have that be an honors level class anyway, and rather than have those two pieces kind of hang there and pull against each other for enrollment to make that one class, that students, when they get to that Spanish 5 area, will either be taking Spanish 5 honors or AP Spanish. It makes sense. Another kind of piece of business is we're eliminating the Spanish 1A, 1B strand that we had. We eliminated running Spanish 1A last year. We're finishing Spanish 1B this year to complete that string so that students will have I guess the culmination of a Spanish 1 credit there, but we found over time of running this class that the preparation was not what we were expecting it to be, so we are fully including students who would be taking that Spanish 1A, B piece into our Spanish 1 classes, and we're doing that this year. There's no changes in the mathematics department. The next piece is the science, technology, and engineering department. We have realigned physics, which I think is a great move. We've had 2 college prep physics classes for years, and we had an honors physics class and we had an AP physics class. The honors physics class eventually was turned into a course called AP Physics 1, and that eliminated the honors physics track. Over time, we found that the students are less prepared than we'd like them to be for that class, so we want to have the honors physics class back. And in doing so, putting that piece in, we've taken the modern physics class that was a college prep course and the project physics class, conceptual physics class, they were both CP courses, and turned them into one CP physics class. So now the strand will be CP Physics, Honors Physics, and then off to AP Physics 1 or AP Physics C, the mechanics class that we teach. And then the next pieces are kind of mechanical things. We renamed a course to call it Introduction to Software Engineering. That's the same course to go in line with the Project Lead the Way terminology that we need to be using to make it sensical. And because we have a pathway in that engineering technology area, the recommendation from the science department was to create the computer science applications course into an honors level course so that there is a strand there as well. So that's the same course that we've had before, but it's going to be created in an honors level curriculum. And then the last piece would be the technology integration program that we have here that is supported by a teacher and students who work in our technology area to learn and support our technology here in the building, is being broken into 2 parts. So that's being renamed from a technology integration to technology exploration. So they're going to do the cyber piece that they've been doing all along, and being broken off into a help desk where students will be assigned to technology support personnel, media specialists in the building to be able to go out and do those support pieces that either we need in the guidance office or our machinery or our skills. Those students would be people that we could tap into that would say, hey, can you teach me how to do this? Can you show me how to do this? Can you go into this classroom and create these presentations with teachers? So we're breaking that off into 2 different parts, 2 different skill sets. So that's the culmination of the changes that we've produced in this book.
Would Would you like to ask any questions about those courses first, and then we can go into
Sure.
the English piece? Or
Sure.
do you want
Any
us to go straight
questions or
through?
comments, with the exception of those related to grade 9 English? Yes, Amy?
So when you guys make changes, how do you work on data that was collected in terms of figuring out which would be the best fit for the students? Do you take information, obviously between teacher to teacher, but do you include students, input, parents, administration?
Some of these changes we look at, certainly the data that we're looking at in some of the core classes is MCAS data. We're also looking at success. Mr. Beebe talked about how we noticed that students were performing at AP levels in the preparatory classes for that, so that's some other data that we look into. I also think a big piece of the data that we looked into this year was class sizes and what students are signing up for courses, especially with the technology courses. The teachers there would really like to see larger numbers and more subscription to those courses, so we were kind of looking at how can we tweak those courses to make them more interesting, more applicable to students, more hands-on, so things like that. Generally, like I said, the changes are discussed in the departments first, so the teachers are engaging in conversations. I know some departments have done surveys with students to ask what you would like to see in terms of course offerings. I wouldn't say that that's happened across the board, but that's certainly happened in many areas. So that's really how it's traditionally, that's how it went this year, and I'm not sure if that's traditionally how it's been done, but anything else?
Yeah, well, I'd say in years past, we've had an academic advisory council that's made up of students that's worked with me, stronger in other years than this year. There hasn't been that kind of input from students this year, but there's always been that opportunity. And I know a lot of the conversation that came about the physics piece is a perfect example, is around trying to level that off and what's the difference and how come and what's the preparation. You know, I just talked to a couple of kids actually walking down here that are up in the music program that heard what I was doing and what I was talking about, and I had brought that up, and there was an instant sigh of relief, you know, that the honors physics program is kind of coming back out of that jump from college prep to AP, so that there's a lot of that going on.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Yes, Chris?
I just had a couple of general comments, not about any of the specific courses you talked about. I can't find the page I read. I'm pretty sure I read that you recommend that each student carry 6 courses, and we have 7 periods, right? So that really leaves them room for 1 elective for half a year, because they have to take gym too.
Are we really going to do this?
So
You're
but
going to
they-
confuse the world here for having this discussion. But yeah, it's a 7-block schedule. It's 6 meeting a day.
Right.
So the students pick 6. The 7th is put aside for me to put health and gym in, and then for academic support or special ed supports, those types of things.
Okay.
So there will be opportunities for kids to have academic support blocks in that schedule where they can get extra help, do homework.
So an
join
elective is one
clubs.
of the 6?
Elective is one of the 6, correct.
Okay.
English, math, science, social studies, world language, and an elective.
Okay.
And the 7th is health and gym and a lot of other things, music, band, drama,
Right.
chorus.
It
We
just,
try to put 8 things into the 7-block schedule, believe me.
that seems to be the, what happens is that they really just end up with no time. They don't have the, you know, there's never, they don't catch their
Only if they
breath
don't
during the
follow
day.
the recommendation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other question I had was about ASCs.
Mhm.
I don't know if they're being run differently now than when my kids were in school. But when I read this outline of what the ASC is supposed to be about, where you report to your teacher, but you're supposed to be able to go for help wherever. My kids' experience was different than that. They were, you know, they were assigned to Mrs. Brown, and she said, "Oh no, you're just staying with me. You can't go anywhere," and they couldn't go. So it almost became like an individual teacher could make up the rule, and some of them could get the help they wanted, some of them they couldn't. Is it all still being run in the CAF?
No.
Okay.
It's a variety of all of that. The original intent that maybe you were referring back to was different when we had more staff to go around as far as duty
Well, I'm reading
application.
today's
Yeah, I would say
description.
that probably needs a little bit of updating to today's version. Yeah.
Because
So
what's in the book describes.
Right. So there's a couple pieces that you mentioned. So number one, there's a dependence on teacher availability. So sometimes kids can leave ASCs to go work with individual teachers if that teacher is available and willing to work with students during that time. It does happen. Can it happen across the board for every student? No, based on teacher availability and schedules. I haven't encountered any situations this year where a student has been told that they can't leave to go do something. If they're coming with the teacher pass and a teacher has requested that they're working with a student, that happens. I know that there are students who sometimes go down and work in the culinary program additionally, or in the school store additionally, and doing other pieces and other aspects in school that are sort of connected to academics, but not necessarily an academic support moment, but still doing some work around a course that they may be taking, or the computer class is a good example of that. But students are assigned to an ASC. Some of them are in the cafeteria, some of them are in the upper library, some of them are in teacher classrooms. For the most part, there are 2 teachers assigned to an ASC, so there's enough support, and generally 2 different teachers with 2 different backgrounds who can help kids with work. Some of them do appear to be more silent study sessions. Some you see kids doing collaborative group work together if you're assigned to an ASC where you have partners in there who are in other classes. And then, sometimes you do see teachers giving direct support for the ASCs, and sometimes you don't. I do think that there's a range of what that looks like, as AJ said, and there's a lot of different dependent factors.
Okay, just the way the description reads to me, it almost sounds more like the Learning Center than the Learning Center is another academic support spot, right?
It is. But again, in a learning center, it's going to vary from period to period what it
Right.
looks like in terms of what students need. And it's the same thing. Sometimes teachers are giving direct one-to-one support. Sometimes students are working quietly and they're, sort of launched on their own. So I think that it is a very flexible learning space. But I do think it's a productive, the feedback from students is that it's a productive space for them. Because of what you said earlier about students' schedules being packed.
Right.
And, their after-school lives are packed too, so I think it gives a good opportunity for students to get the help that they need from their peers and whoever is helping to run the ASC, but then also get some work done during the school day.
Okay, but I guess the other thought I had was kind of tying those together was that if they do take the 6 courses,
Right.
then they'll never have an ASC, right?
No, they will.
They will in that 7th period opposite health and gym,
So half the year, or
wellness.
No,
No,
full
no.
year.
it doesn't go
Yeah,
half and half
They
anymore?
have 3 other meetings in the 6-day cycle where they would have access to that program.
Okay,
Wellness and health don't meet every day, so it flexes those 6 periods.
so it's every other day rather than half a year type of thing?
It's the full year, but it's
full
not
year.
every day.
Okay,
Right.
right, okay.
Now we've confused everybody who doesn't know a rotating schedule, sorry. It's
No, that
I
makes
just
that-
learned it like last week. It's taken me that long, so now
Full
I
year
can talk
every
about
other
it.
day makes more sense to me than half a year
Unless you're
and half a
taking
year.
pool.
Right.
So, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I just have a question, and I'm not sure if these were in place last year, but just kind of going off what you mentioned about some of the electives. So the internships that are on page 60, I believe it's 60 and, oops, now I just lost it, maybe 59, 58. So again, I'm not sure if those are, you didn't tag them as new, AJ, but have we
They're-
been,
yeah.
what's that?
They're not new.
So my question is, I guess, just what opportunities, if there are new opportunities for our students to participate in internship-wise? I know that we have, like, the child development internship with the Woodville. Are they specific, or are they really student-driven?
Well, they're a little bit of both. I mean, they're a kind of a collaborative effort between a student who wants to get involved in something like that, and if their schedule allows them to do something like that. And I'd even throw in, even if their schedule didn't, they could do that for credit without leaving. See, most of the kids who do the career internship piece
Yep.
leave school. So they have the academic support blocks that Chris is talking about at the end of the day.
Yep.
So they're able to sign out rather than use that block and go off to a job site or a place that they're volunteering. And that's available to juniors and seniors who are interested in doing that.
So they just need to bring the proposal to you?
Yeah, the guidance counselors have an application packet, most of them, or they all oversee their students who are doing it. And they're monitored whether or not they're continuing to do it, whether their parents approve of it, all that kind of stuff.
Great.
It's pretty liberal, to be honest with you. I mean, kids who want to do it are able to do it. It's a matter of what they want to get involved in and if they need assistance in finding something to do. But most of these kids have part-time jobs, and they are able to get hours earlier in the day sometimes that work for them around sports or having to be home at certain times for different things. So if they can work starting at 1 o'clock instead of at 2:30, and they want to sacrifice that ASC time, which kind of comes in with the conversation with their parents and their guidance counselors, like, should we keep you in school so you can do your homework in that time frame or get extra help or make up tests, or should we allow you kind of this, liberty to go do this? Yeah.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
How many students participate?
I knew you were going to ask that question. I'd probably say 30.
Not
It's not a huge number, The Woodville interns probably run 5 or 6 kids that are over there, maybe a couple of more, and probably 25 or so through the guidance counselors. Yeah. And it's a big part of the PAL program as well. The same system works for them.
Any other comments? Okay.
So,
Yes, wanna
okay,
pick up on-
sorry.
on ELA?
Yeah, so the first thing I'd like to say is that I think what we're talking about here is, I wasn't here at the last proposal that everybody speaks to around making changes to unleveling. But from what I understand from that change, this is a very different proposal and a very different move than that move was a few years ago. We are talking about heterogeneously grouping grade 9 students in ELA class, but giving honors weight for all students. So what we're basically saying, for students who are already entering at the honors level, this isn't really much of a change for them, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why that is. But I really want to clarify that, this idea, this is not my proposal. I wish that Dr. Paul Bavuso could have been here with us tonight. Unfortunately, he could not, but he's really led the work with his teachers and with Bridget Haggerty, the department coordinator, around this idea. And they've been discussing and proposing and supporting this idea and trying to really thinking about readiness of the department and who's ready for this work. We didn't go out seeking this work and looking for it to happen in different places. This work kind of bubbled up from the teachers and thinking about how to best serve the students. So I think what this change would do is, we're talking about an equitable experience for all students. We think it will help to balance class sizes. We believe it will increase opportunities for flexible grouping and provide more opportunities for differentiated instruction. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, which is one of the high leverage practices for the school this year, and we're really working on that. One of the reasons why we've made a shift is right now, there's really not a clear distinction around curriculum between a CP English 9 ELA class and the honors class. Based on the mass curricular frameworks, regardless of the level, the course curriculum is determined by the frameworks. And so when you're thinking about the curriculum in the honors and the college level courses, they are the same curriculum, they are the same standards, and we're holding kids to those standards. We feel like with the right supports that all students can meet and exceed those standards in the same class, and that would really provide a solid foundation for all students. Reading, writing, speaking, and listening are foundational components in all courses across the building, so we think that English is really a good place for this, and I'm going to call it a detract class, right? So it is at the honors level, but it is not tracked beyond that. So we think that 9th grade ELA, based on those foundational strategies and those foundational learning pieces, is really integral for all students. I think the other piece of it is that we're talking about, and teachers have been talking about this, sometimes your roster gets overwhelmed with students who need support. Your roster can also, in a course, get overwhelmed with high-performing students and who need constant differentiation and challenge at a different level. So we're thinking by de-leveling the classes again and creating these heterogeneous groupings, and we're really working and supporting differentiation, teachers will have a better mix in every single class. Without the leveling and different choices in the schedule, and AJ could speak to the numbers, we're able to offer the same course. We can open up the same number of sections but keep numbers down, because we don't have to pick and choose where the honor slots go and the college slots go. So we actually lower class numbers without any additional burden on the budget. We're not talking about adding teachers or taking away teachers for this same number of teachers, but we can keep the class sizes more consistent, which is hugely important for differentiation, right? You want to keep your numbers lower for that. Just for some data, currently about 2/3 of our students are enrolled in honors English. So I know there was this conversation in a comment, and it was a good comment in terms of like, why are we thinking about this here in this district? So there's a couple pieces of that I've been thinking about. The range of our learners, even in this district, is pretty wide, and I'm going to talk about the achievement gap in a few minutes. But you know, one of the things that we're noticing is that if 2/3 of our students are coming up into the honors level, there's already a wide range of learners in those courses, right? We have a very wide range of learning there, and so we think that sort of going to this detract course will not stretch that range too much further. The other piece of that is that, yes, you know, we do mostly feed from one school, but knowing what we know about adolescent development and some, you know, pre-adolescent development, students in 8th grade are very different people than they are in 9th grade. And so really, we want to think about not making choices in terms of placing students into courses based on behavioral or emotional readiness, but rather than on the standards. So this idea of having a 9th grade class where our teachers are laying these foundational strategies with students, getting to know the students in front of them, making sure that all the students are raised to that level of expectation, and I'm talking all students, ELL students, SPED students, students who are coming from all different spectrums of the socioeconomic scale. We're really raising the bar for all of those students, and then the teachers at the 9th grade level are able to make the determination of where they go next with parents, as we do now in course selection. So that means that after 9th grade, that's not changing anyone's trajectory. If a student decides that they want to continue at the honors level, that's with the teacher recommendation around how they're performing in the class, just like it happens now, that would continue. If a student is struggling or feels like the pace is too quick or that they just maybe need a little more digging in next year, our teachers, knowing those students and knowing who's going to teach them next year, we can go into the college level. So that won't change in terms of the course selection process there. I think it's important to mention that the approach matching the core values of the district, and I think that this is a really important piece. You know, we as a district value equity and access for all of our students. We value growth mindset. We value this idea that educating students is about moving every single one of them along in their progression of learning and growing through challenges, which again, these challenges can look very different for every student, and making gains as they encounter these challenges. So we know that raising the bar for students who traditionally maybe would have gone into a college level course might feel like a challenge for these students. But again, I think that we have teachers who are dedicated to this, who believe in this, and who want to support students to reach high levels of achievement. So someone had asked about expertise and sort of where our thinking is around research. Excuse me. I think, again, I want to talk to some of the work that Paul Bavuso has done around this. He's worked very closely with DESE. He's worked very closely with some of his counterparts in other in his network of high schools in Massachusetts. And we're finding that more and more schools are unleveling or heterogeneously grouping grade 9 students in different courses, some in English, some in math. And again, our choice is English because that's where the drive came from the teachers. So it came up from teachers there. But we're noticing that this is happening in other schools. Some of the other schools that Paul has talked about, Arlington, Concord, North Andover, Westford, and Weston. Cambridge is actually in the process of moving in this direction, and reached out to AJ a few weeks ago to get sort of our thinking in sort of how we're moving this and what we're doing and how we're approaching this. Again, I think that this idea of providing that equitable baseline, right, to support skill development and growth in all incoming students and allowing high school teachers to help determine that trajectory is something that's really out there with other schools in the thinking, so it puts us in line with that. I do think NEASC was brought up, but that's been a big thing. So this move would put us in compliance with the NEASC standard that currently we are out of compliance with, and that's been a huge struggle for many schools. And I'm going to read you the line from NEASC. The school is equitable, inclusive, and fosters heterogeneity, where every student over the course of the high school experience is enrolled in a minimum of one heterogeneously grouped core course. So that would be, according to NEASC, English Language Arts, or social studies, or math, or science, or world languages. And right now, we don't have a course in those areas that is heterogeneously grouped or detract. So that would put us in compliance with that piece. The last piece that I want to talk about, and to me, this is the most important shift, and it's sort of a shift in metacognition, right? It's the how. And it's really shifting the level of discourse in grade 9 ELA classes. And I have to say that I believe this as an educator and as a parent. We need to further develop students' ability to engage in discourse in all classes. Students, we hope, will come to understand other perspectives, cultures, and backgrounds. They will appreciate that the 21st century classroom and workplace are settings in which people from often widely divergent cultures, experiences, and perspective must learn and work together. Students, we're going to support students, right? The idea is that we have to offer them support to seek understanding across these areas and work with one another. Even when their skills in reading, listening, communicating, speaking effectively, they may be diverse in terms of their what they bring to the classrooms, but we've got to help students to work together and to all learn from that experience, and we think that that process would be hugely important in this shift. So those are some of the big pieces that I really wanted to talk about tonight. One other thing that I wanted to add that I've been thinking about, you know, we heard the question the other night, is like, what is the research out there that supports this? What is the data out there that supports this? There's a bunch of data, research out there that supports this that I'll talk about in a minute. But I think we have some data in our school right now that shows us that tracking might not be working as best as we think it is. If you look at our most recent MCAS scores, you know, we have some concerns at the school, and we are looking and digging deep around how are we growing learners at all levels. And the data will show us, both at the lower levels and the higher performing students, we're not growing students as much as I think we should be. We've had conversations with that in our instructional leadership team. We've been talking to teachers about that, and we are doing work on that. But it leaves us with that wonder, is if we are not growing students at those levels and we are currently in a tracked system, I wonder if a move like this, we're really raising the expectations and talking about growth for all students and really supporting teachers, and I'll talk about that in a minute too, to do that. If we could see, if we would see some improvement in our growth scores, and that's really our goal, because we'd like to see some improvement there. The last piece of data, again, there's a lot of data out there that would support this. Of course, you can find some research out there that will also tell you to go in the other direction, and that's how research works, right? And so we could probably all come up with some research that supports lots of different decisions that we make in schools. But I think there's a through line in some of these some of this research out there that I found, and it talks about the conditions for successful detracking. So it's not about the move of detracking, it's the conditions that exist if you're going to do that. And so a through line in a couple of these studies, Pedro Neguero, he's out at UCLA. He was actually one of my professors when I was in New York, and he's worked at NYU, and he's really brilliant around the idea of reaching the achievement gap, closing the achievement gap. And he really thinks that, and again, achievement gap is not just about race. And we have talked about the achievement gap and how it impacts a community like Wakefield, and we do have an achievement gap in our data. So the conditions that he talks about, and Carol Ann Tomlinson also talks about these conditions for detracking, resources, which we have, training. We've already been talking with Paul and Bridget around what is the training that teachers will need, how will we prepare them this summer, how we will continue to work with them and support them throughout the year. System-wide support. Again, we've had these conversations with Doug in the Central Office Administration, Kara, and we've been having this conversation in terms of, you know, how does this play into the bigger picture in the Wakefield schools and what we're doing with students. So he makes that argument that if we can do all of those things, we can talk about raising expectations. And again, not just raising expectations, but closing the achievement gap, desegregating classrooms, he would argue, around race, gender, socioeconomic status, and our ELL and our SPED students. So for all of those reasons, we're really, we're confident. I think the teachers are excited, and I know that there's work to be done in terms of training and preparing, but I think in terms of the philosophical preparedness, the department is there. So.
Okay. The questions for the administration. Yes, Chris.
On the is it homogeneous? Anyway, but heterogeneous. Okay.
Depends which way you want to go.
Either way.
Either way,
What do we have now versus-
it would seem to me that the you're going to have your high achievers and your struggling students in the same class like you do a lot of other classes. And having the smaller size is great. But the concerns, I guess, I hear from the letters that we've gotten were that they seem to be like on both ends of the spectrum, that the struggling student is going to hold back the advanced student, and that, or that the struggling student isn't going to be able to keep up, and therefore they're going to fall out. So at the same time, I realize that the teaching isn't what I had. So it seems as though things go into groups, and they're more group work than individual work these days anyway. So is that what forms that safety net?
Yeah, so again, we'll talk about differentiated instruction, and again, something that we've taken on this year at the high school, and we have a lot of work to do, and we're going to continue working on that. That's our high leverage practice this year. It's one of the high leverage practices in the district, and there's a lot of work to do there. But I think you kind of nailed it right there, Chris, when you talked about this idea that teaching in a differentiated classroom isn't a traditional classroom. It's not about the teacher conveying knowledge to students. It's about getting students to engage in learning opportunities based on standards-based, right? So how do they acquire standards? So when we're talking about, for example, writing, you already, even with high-performing students, have kids coming in at such different levels of preparedness in writing, even if they all come from the Galvin. That is the nature of learning to be a better writer. And so a teacher differentiates, I would argue, as an English teacher, that differentiation in an English classroom is probably, I don't want to say easier, because it's not easier, but it lends itself to an English classroom based on a strategy like writing, because you can have opportunities for different kinds of grouping where a high-performing student is partnering with another high-performing student because they have the same strategy around their writing that they're working on, the kind of feedback that you're giving students about their writing, the kinds of writing process strategies and activities that you're having students go through. So again, it's not me giving one example of this is what good writing looks like, but it's working with every student to grow their writing and grow a strategy such as, using evidence to support a claim or whatever the standard is that we're working on. So, I think that there already is a wide range of learners in our English classrooms, right? And I think that the level in which we're seeing our honor students being challenged in some areas could also be boosted a little bit in terms of differentiation, right? Because it entails that the teacher really gets to know the individual needs of the student. And so that anywhere on that learning spectrum, the teacher strategies are going to have to be different to match the needs of that learner. I don't know if that answers your question.
I was trying to give you an opportunity to work with that, but it just does seem that the limited amount of exposure I have, it doesn't seem as though the honors class is necessarily all that different than the CP class in the first place.
I don't think it is.
I just think that when I see that they all have the same novels they're reading, and they all have basically the same papers. Maybe the honors class has got to write a longer paper or provide more research or something, but there's very minimal differences from what I've seen. And as long as there's a safety net for the struggling student, and then that safety net is the school and not the other students.
Right.
I think we're, we're on
And
the
there's
right
challenges
track.
on the higher end too. I mean, I think
Right.
both conditions have to exist. We're not talking about teaching to the middle, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's sometimes what people, for some time period before we've really wrapped our mind around differentiation, that's what it can look like. And sometimes it looks like that even in a tracked classroom. So I think we're really pushing at that instructional strategy.
And I also think what's different that's hard to get our heads around is that the whole concept of individual growth. It doesn't. It's not where you are. It's how much you've grown in a year. That rather than looking at number grades or letter grades, it's well, I've gone from this level to this level individually, and that seems what DESE's going with all their testing of it. But individual growth is kind of the more important piece. And I think the adults don't really grasp that yet because they didn't experience it.
And I think I could probably throw in another historical perspective when you asked about, the way things used to be. We've done this once already. years ago, we used to have another layer below college prep that was called a language-based program. So you would take language-based English, college prep English, honors English. And the same conversation went on that we're having right now. And we eventually got rid of that language-based classroom level of courses to include those kids into our ELA program. And that's what we're doing right now. We're including those students in the English curriculum at the CP level. And we have paraprofessionals, we have co-teaching program, we have all of those things right now to support those kids. And so what we're doing now in 2019 is leveling up college prep. You know, and there's a theory, there's a process, there's practice behind it, which is a little bit different than the phone call I got that Amy was talking about earlier. A community somewhere in this area called and wanted to know what we were doing with this leveling program because they were getting rid of the CP designation on their classes. They felt it was a stigma in their community for their kids and their transcripts and all the rest of it. And my question was, well, what are you doing? Well, they're not doing anything. They're just taking the label off because somehow that makes a difference. They're not changing anything. We're doing something dramatically different. We're taking levels off. We're changing the practice. We're bringing everybody up. And I think Amy brought up a good point earlier about raising the bar, the thoughtfulness, the planning, everything that's gone into this energy, the risk-taking, the investment, the growth model, all of those pieces that we're looking at are the things that the adults are doing that we're asking the kids to do as well, and we're modeling it for them. So that's kind of what's happening here, I guess, in my estimation.
So if I just want to first start by saying thank you very much for sharing and for sharing the work of the teachers here. You know, one of the things that resonates with me that you shared earlier, Amy, was that the fact that if you are destined or a rising student that might be selecting an honors class, this is really no change for you. Right? The only difference is that you're going to see some other students in your class.
And your class sizes might be a little smaller, too.
And your class size might be smaller, which is...
And the same kids that you're seeing in your classes now in 8th grade.
Right. And so, but one of the things that, you know, I think is important to include is this notion that, you know, some of our most advanced learners really have a lot of anxiety around performance and getting the right grades and kind of spending the right amount of time and building a profile. And, you know, they are kind of a population that we've seen is kind of growingly at risk, right? Where they're having difficulty just managing the stress of this, right? And so when we talk about supporting all students and supporting students to have models in classrooms that they can grow and learn with and from, right? And I think that, and I think the research will bear this out as well, that having kind of that range and having other models in the class are especially around speaking and listening, right? Not only just reading and writing, but speaking and listening, the whole literacy model, which I'm glad you brought that up because that's what the ELA framework talks about. We talk a lot about test taking and kind of writing and reading, but in regard to the speaking and listening piece and having kind of normative opportunities to learn from other models and classes, I think that this is going to be really great socially and emotionally for our most advanced learners. And I think that I can't thank you enough. I think that this is really progressive. I think it's innovative. I think it's like why you're here, right? And so thank you. I really appreciate it.
Ann?
Thank you. This was very helpful. So I think of this as not looking at students reaching some sort of objective up here, right? It's where are you, and let's get you moving further up the ladder, right? Based on best practices, the best way to teach. So my experience in education is that reaching all students, regardless of their level, requires an enormous amount of responsibility. It's incredibly difficult, but it requires the best teaching practices. So what I'm hearing is that the English department is ready to take that challenge, and that essentially they're providing, at least for ninth grade, maybe more of an individualized experience, because they have to reach every kid, regardless of where that particular student is. So I think, you know, back when I was in school, it was how many books did the honors class read, right? How quickly did they get through stuff? And the standards aren't about how quickly you get through anything, it's how deeply you get through it. So it's fewer things and different types of things that the kids read. So they read certainly literature, but they also have to be exposed to, you know, technical writing, and you don't have to get through that stuff really quickly in order to understand it well. You know, you don't have to be the smartest kid in the class in order to really understand it. You just have to learn and get the skills to be able to think deeply and to ask the questions and to understand. And I think also begin to work collaboratively, you know, in ninth grade, which, you know, I think a lot of the classes do a lot of group work, even in the math classes. But this, to me, seems like a great opportunity for the students to really learn with their peers, as they've been doing all through elementary school and into, you know, all through middle school. But in ninth grade, you know, the stakes are higher, I guess, because things show up on a transcript. But ultimately, you're learning these really important skills, and the grades will come. The grades will come, and it won't get watered down. The curriculum won't be. It sounds like it's going to probably even be better than what we are currently offering, because there'll be a more sort of deliberate focus on reaching every student.
And I think the focus is going to be on the instructional core, and perhaps not the sort of the teacher-student part of the instructional core, not the curricular part of the instructional core, because that is there. I mean, certainly tweaking and developing as we prepare for this, but I think you're right, and I think that support and professional development for teachers that will continue, again, as we start planning this, and then through the year, and then evaluating, right, how well it's working for students, and really being keenly aware of what you're talking about, that individualized piece and the growth, I think, is important. Thank you.
Colleen?
Yes, thank you. Thank you to both of you again, and also Paul Bavuso and Bridget Haggerty for their presentation. I was fortunate enough to be able to see that in person. So this may be a silly comparison, but as you were talking, and as Chris and Ann were talking too, like I think of my dinner table, and when we're all fortunate, you know, the six of us to be there together, and what, like, the quality of those conversations are like, given the wide range of ages and intellects, really, of all my children. And I'll have to say, of course, it's a much better and vibrant conversation when all of us are there. And, you know, you may say, okay, you know, my oldest, yeah, he's the most book smart, or whatever, you know, we could use all these old-fashioned terms, right? But they all bring something different to the table. And really no one less intelligent than the other. It's just the way that their minds work, and they're different. And again, a sort of a silly comparison on a very low level, but I think of this class like that, and growth mindset is a communal effort. You know, it is something that we're striving towards, and we're all putting in that together. You know, whether you're an educator, whether you're a parent, whether you are a student in that classroom. So it excites me that we're moving towards that, because that is our instructional strategy, that is a mission of our schools, and that this is sort of one of those steps that we take. You spoke to a couple other things, again, about just the impact of differentiated learners in the same classroom and how they can support each other, and how maybe your traditional honor student who maybe has got A's and honors and AP all along, you know, but they don't have the same intellect that a student maybe who's been in CP classes all along has. Maybe they're better writers or readers or speakers, you know, and so what they can add to each other's learning experience. And you've already spoken to that, and I was going to ask you to speak to that a little bit more about how they can impact each other in this foundational classroom. And then really giving the students themselves the confidence to then say, okay, I am going to try honors, or I am going to try CP, because you know what, I'm looking at my trajectory and I'm really more into the sciences, so I'm going to focus more on that, and I'm going to do CP English, you know, and maybe your honors English person, you know, they're kind of flowing that way. So I think the students are going to feel more confident about their decision going forward, because they have like the tools they need to make that decision as a 9th grader and maybe not as a middle schooler. And middle school is really tough. 7th and 8th graders are, you know, I talked to my 8th grader and it's like, wow, you know, and I'm like, oh, you know, yeah, we won't talk today, you know.
You're talking to him right now. Look in the camera.
Am I? Oh no, that's my 5th grader over there? Yeah. He's on there. But yeah, so the conversations can be tough, you know, and so I feel like I do see the maturity change, you know, even in that 1 year, for them to feel confident and just, you know, they kind of walk a little taller because they've now experienced this environment, you know. So thank you. I am really excited for you to be able to present to our parents. Received a lot of emails, obviously, and we've heard a lot today and yesterday and since Thursday. And, you know, whether it's negative or positive, I think it means, like, we can take it as this is what our parents are thinking, and here's the information that we need to get out to them, because we truly want everyone to feel positive about this right at the end. So I appreciate your time and your time that you're going to put in the future as well. So thank you.
Yeah, RJ?
Thank you both for the presentation. So I definitely understand the reasoning behind this, you know, that we want to challenge our kids, you know, among other things. You mentioned plenty of good ideas behind it, and but I do kind of hear where the parents are coming from. You know, I'm just thinking back to, you know, when I was here at Wakefield High, and I think that it's coming into a new school, you know, 9th grade. It's a little overwhelming, you know, for many kids, you know, to do honors their first year, their freshman year. And, you know, I think certain kids sort of thrive in different subjects. For me, it was different classes, not English. And, you know, I would rather sort of strongly encourage 8th graders to do honors 9th grade English, or even the 9th grade English teachers to strongly encourage it going into 10th grade. I would even be okay with mandating, you know, one honors class, whether that's English or something different, not necessarily English. But I think that it's kind of twofold. You know, I do understand that the high achievers also want their own honors class as well. I can understand that. So I would definitely prefer that it not be mandated, for the 9th graders at least. And just a couple follow-up questions from it. So one would be, is there still an AP 9th grade English class? And number 2 is, have you thought of any alternatives because of the criticism at all? Or?
So
AP.
there is no AP at the 9th grade level.
Okay.
There hasn't been. So AP in English exists in 11th and 12th grade. There's AP Lit and AP Lang. So students who are more into sort of the writing craft and the structure of writing would take the AP Lang. And then AP Lit is really a study of literature, similar to a college level literature. So that's in 11th and 12th grade. Students can select those AP classes in 11th and 12th grade, even from the college level. So you can be in 10th grade college English and still go into AP junior year. So AP is the face of AP has really changed, and College Board themselves really recommend schools having more of an open approach in terms of kids who feel that they're ready for the course and want to take on that challenge of college, because we all believe that all of our students are ready to take on the challenge of college once they leave Wakefield, right? So we want to give them that experience. In terms of you use the word mandated. So 9th grade English is mandated. It already is. And I think what we're looking at this as, we are not, as I said to Ann a little bit earlier, we're not really changing the curriculum. Kids are already presented with this curriculum right now in CP. The leveling and the courses over the last 5 years with the adoption of the Common Core have really changed the face of what high school courses look like. They're the same standards, college level, honors level, and ninth grade, they're the same exact standards, same curriculum. Certainly, there's a piece to it that we're talking about, this social emotional piece, sort of the environment of the classroom. And Colleen, I really like the parallel that you made, because I think that to me speaks to it. I mean, we are talking about diversifying these classrooms a little bit in terms of learning styles in a plethora of different diversity. But I think that in terms of what this offers, it's not saying to kids that the way that I think we're talking about an AP course in terms of forcing kids to take an AP course, which we would never do. I think it's more saying that this is the ninth grade course, this is the curriculum, and that we are going to put the supports in place to make sure all kids master those standards, not the course, the standards in that course, which they already need to master in the CP course. In terms of an alternative, we keep it the same. And that's the alternative, right?
Hypothetically, could you do a CP and an AP? Instead of just all honors?
You don't offer AP at the ninth grade
Oh,
level.
you can't, okay.
It's a mandated College Board curriculum.
Okay.
I mean, that's what they prescribed to us to sign into, was 11th and 12th grade.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Amy?
I just have a couple of questions. The first thing I wanted to start off was on the packet that we received, there's some indicators of course levels that, break down what the difference is between a college prep and an honors class is. So, a teacher would assume that the student has, a good command of reading in a CP class and a strong command of reading in like an honors class. So I just feel like, across the board with, problem solving, kids in the CP may need some guidance, and then the expectations on the honors class is, there's minimal guidance. In regards to independent working, same thing. There could be some guidance and no guidance. You need to be able to work independently. So I feel like the expectations in an honors class are high. And I feel like if kids are coming in from 8th grade to the 9th grade level with those high expectations and they're not prepared for it, I just think it might be difficult for them to transition into those classes with their peers. And, we're talking about 14-year-old children, and, they know in their class that they compare. All kids do it. So they might say, I'm in the class with this person, and they may not feel comfortable with that. So I think the children who belong in an honors class are looking to have a rigorous curriculum, and they want to be challenged. And I feel like kids who might not quite be there might be hesitant to participate in the class. So I'm just wondering, with those different types of dynamics with kids coming in, even though the class sizes will be smaller, what is the training that the teachers are actually going to receive in order for them to make sure that this transition is happening smoothly for these kids? That's my first question.
Okay, so I want to talk about the indicators of course levels, because we've talked about this a little bit, and we've talked about it, again, in our leadership team. I've talked to some departments about, I find these indicators of course levels, even though they're in our handbook and they're going to continue there for this year, they're somewhat subjective. I don't necessarily, as an educator, agree with how we've laid out what an honors student looks like, because I think, again, there is a wide range of learners among every class and every student, even some of our high-performing students, especially going back to what Doug was talking about, as we learn more about social emotional behavior and some of what students bring that's not right on the surface but is right under. And so in terms of readiness to engage and collaborate, the ability to listen and problem solve together, I think those skills for a ninth grader are very undeveloped for most students, even at the honors level. And so I think that I understand what you're saying about that idea of students coming in, and maybe AJ in a minute you can talk about the peer piece a little bit, because I don't see that happening as much at the high school. We were talking about that in the school council last night a little bit about whether students are making assumptions about other students based on leveling, and I don't see that. I see more students at the high school making decisions around leveling in terms of strengths and challenges and what they really want to explore. So whether or not they're going to take AP, it's something that they love to do and want to explore. I think in terms of the second part of your question was about training. You know, again, we're in January, and so what we're starting to do, Paul has been, we actually have a conversation that's supposed to happen next week with Kara Morrow and Paul Bavuso in terms of laying out some training, whether that's going to be a guided book study. I know we've been talking and bantering around. Carolyn Tomlinson has a lot of research out there to help differentiation and looking at these models. Talk to Paul a little bit about taking some teachers in the spring to go look at schools that are doing this work and talk to their teachers in terms of what's working and what's not working. But definitely, that's another piece of the work. Also, some time this summer planning. I feel very fortunate to be in a district that supports teachers planning over the summer and really anticipating. And again, I think that planning will not be around some of the curricular planning that we've had in other departments in the summer, but more, as I said to Anne, the instructional planning to address, Amy, the things that you just pointed out in terms of how do you address a reticent learner. I would argue that that training is training that all of our teachers need at every course in the entire high school. But this is a starting point, and I think that these teachers are really going to be the leader in this in terms of differentiating that. In terms of other supports in the classroom, I just thought about it when you were saying it in terms of sort of having para support. You know, we're noticing working with Marcy Bercuzzi, who is our special education person at the high school, and she's fantastic and has been so helpful in really breaking down the understandings of where students need support. And we're finding that it's not traditionally folks feel like college level classes have more kids who need supports. That's not true. So we're envisioning that the 9th grade will have more evenly layered support across it next year with this change, because there are students who are going to need the help of another adult in the classroom, and we have that now in some of our honors sections now that's happening. So that additional layer of support and training will have to happen
So
there.
will the co-taught classroom setting still be put in place?
Yes.
Next year?
Yeah, well, right. So, I mean, that has changed too, and that's sort of more of a special education conversation about where the co-taught is happening. And I know there were some changes before I got here into this year that I don't recall because it feels like that September was like, I don't know, 10 years ago. But there were some changes there. And so, yeah, that won't be impacted. If the co-taught was being planned, it will continue to be planned there in the English class.
Okay. Let me just grab my notes here. So when, what's that?
No, I was trying to figure out what she was talking about, but I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
science.
Yeah, that's
So
what I was
with the, so you have a teacher who now has this blended classroom, and when maybe the curriculum will include grammar and other things, and the children will all be tested, will they receive the same test? Will anything be like modified for a child who's in like who might be who might have normally taken the CP class but now is in this particular blended class? Are they grading on different scales? I mean, how is all of that going to happen?
The grading on different scales, no, but assessment is modified in classes across the building now anyway. Good assessment is already modified and is varied and has options, and you know, gone are the days of standard grammar tests. We're talking more authentic project-based learning where there's variations and outcomes that address standards. Right, so will there be standards that are addressed and shown proficiency by every single student? Yes. Will those standards be applied and measured similarly for every single student? Yes. Will the outcomes of what students are producing look different? Yes. So that may mean the kind of writing a student is doing, the depth of knowledge that a student shows in terms of how many sources they're using for a project, the multi-modality that a student might use to present may go really in depth with one student and not another, but those standards can still be shown as proficient. So it's really a different way of thinking about assessment rather than a traditional test. And we're finding in the English department in general, you know, Pearson itself builds in project-based assessments at the end of every unit. They are no longer traditional tests. They are writing pieces. They have a writing model at the beginning of the unit. And so again, already we know that because of proficiencies of writers, I mean, even the adults in this room, we're all very proficient in our lives, but if we looked at our writing samples, they would write, they'd be very, very, I would assume. I mean, I'm sure you're all great writers, but I'll speak for myself. Me and AJ, we'll talk about each other, right? I mean, our levels of writing are very different, and so I think Pearson and the resources in Pearson really help that around already preparing teachers to use authentic alternative assessments that really help to measure standards, but in varied ways. I know that seems vague,
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to give you a vague answer.
Yes.
I'm kind of seeing it as an English teacher and trying to explain it to you and thinking about Pearson, and maybe that's actually a really good point that we could show parents when we do the presentation around what a Pearson assessment looks like now,
Okay.
and how that's varied, because I think that's a really good question that you kind of have to see to
Right.
understand it. So I'm glad you asked that question. Thank you.
Okay, one more. So I know that, and also within this information, that things are going to be monitored throughout the year. So who's doing the monitoring? Where is the data going to be? Will parents continue to be informed? And how do you plan to make sure that kids don't fall through the cracks if they're on the verge of doing that?
Yeah. I think many of those supports that are in place now will continue to be in place in terms of how we monitor to make sure kids are not falling through the cracks in terms of communication with teachers, guidance counselors, and parents, right? And I think, AJ, we talk a lot about in our weekly intervention meetings, how are we increasing communication around kids who are falling behind? And again, that's at all levels.
Yep.
So I think that piece will continue. But I do think Paul and I talked a little bit about how they would want to progress monitor this. And I'm not sure what that data looks like, right? Okay. But I definitely think that there would be some progress monitoring with parents and students in terms of how is this change, so first of all, for kids, it's not going to feel any different because it's the first time at the high school for them, so they wouldn't have known what college and honors felt like before. So I don't know if it will feel different for them. So those aren't really the questions, but the questions are around how the course is working for them. For parents, how is it helping to meet the needs of your students? Where are your students not being challenged enough? Or, as you said, where are you feeling like your child is not being supported, the needs? And so I think that, again, I think that's something that we need to do across the board a little bit more. But I think that this would give us an opportunity to at least figure out how we're going to have teachers. It could come from teachers. But I think that data would be held by Paul and Bridget. That would not be evaluative data. That would be data that would be used by the department to make improvements as the course continues. So it's sort of an iterative process, right, throughout the year, but then moving forward to kind of say, okay, how well did this work? I think at the end of the course, it would be really interesting to look at pass-fail data on this course versus we could look at pass-fail data now for our honors. You love when I do that, right? The pass-fail data. Sorry, what did I say? I don't know.
Nothing.
So that,
I think you're doing great. Keep going.
Okay. So, we could look at that as well. So.
Right.
But I think another place where, like, when you say who would monitor this,
Yeah.
the curriculum coordinator goes to all the PLCs. We have these professional learning communities. It goes back to another thing you were asking about, Chris, the makeup of the ASCs and why are they the way they are. We built in professional learning communities into teacher schedules. So if you and I and Ann and Amy were teaching English 9, we were in a professional learning community. We're meeting together once a 6-day cycle to look at student work and our progress in that class. And we're monitoring it amongst ourselves with the oversight of the curriculum coordinator and the input of all the other teachers that are teaching the class.
And
So
then
there's that type
implementing
of progress monitoring that goes on weekly based on how did this go in your class, how did your kids perform, what kind of feedback are you getting, looking at student work. So that PLC process that we spent so much time putting into the district has a monitoring piece of it that supports things like this. And the curriculum coordinators that we brought into the district as well.
And then will you also, obviously, I'm assuming with the data, you'll obviously know next year at the end of the year how many children continue on to honors
Yeah, we will.
10th grade as opposed to bumping down to CP. And then what would that do to the child as well, keeping that in mind and being mindful of that? You don't want the child to feel defeated because they were in this class and realized they couldn't do it. I know it happens all the time, but they don't have a choice coming in next year.
Right,
Well,
and I think that's a guidance piece. Go ahead.
If we wanted to be here till spring, we could talk about the honors word that we're using, because there's no honors word attached to this. It's English 9. Kids are taking English 9. So the next year when they elect their course, they're going to go to CP or they're going to go to honors. The only part that we've left on there as honors is the weight, because we don't want people worried about the grade point averages. But really, everybody's having a common experience. And it's probably the last place or the one place in high school that all kids will have a common experience. So, we could homogenize ourselves to death around here, splintering kids. We're trying to have kids have a common experience in high school where they can get all the skills and stuff that Ian was talking about, and then they can go on their way. So they're not really dropping up or dropping back when they make their decisions in 10th grade. They're deciding at that point, you know, where they want to spread their wings. You know, I think one of the things that we got to think about is, you know, where is this mindfulness? Where's our social emotional learning at? Where's our race to nowhere going? What are we pushing? And everybody wants to know, hey, where's all this happening? Because I'm not doing it, you're not doing it. What is doing it? You know, so here's an opportunity for us to say in this one place, we want a common experience for our kids. And, you know, these are the things that we want to accomplish. And then they can go off and they can separate themselves as they want. You know, you'll hear from the seniors at some point, they'll say after they have the senior show, I wish we had an opportunity to all get together sometime sooner than at the end of it all. Why didn't we do this before? Well, here's an opportunity for kids to do things all together at this point. And I know I'm watering down the whole argument about English and the rest of it, but we ask 14-year-olds what they want to do when they grow up because they have to decide whether they come here or do they go to the Voc to be a plumber for the rest of their life. When, you know, are we just going to have a common experience, simplify things, kind of stay focused on the social, emotional kind of development and growth, academic growth? I think this is fantastic that we're sitting here having this discussion about teaching and learning. I applaud everybody who's brought this to our attention, who wants to talk about this. I think you've waited too long. I've been here for 33 years. Nobody's ever asked me a question about this book. You know, I think it's fantastic. So, you know, it's great.
Thank you.
I can keep going too. Your turn.
No, I'm good.
All right.
Well, we're certainly glad we've provided you the opportunity after 33 years.
Yes, appreciate it.
To speak your mind.
Yes, thank you. There's a lot in there.
Amen, brother. Amen. So let me wrap up if we can, or at least wrap up this this piece, and again, sort of begin to conclude where we started by thanking you and the members of both your teams in the high school for bringing not only this conversation to the forefront on ninth grade English, but all of the types of changes that you make. I mean, Mr. Beebe, you do come before the committee each year and talk about the ins and outs, and that is not ever taken lightly. At least I can say by members of the committee. And it is certainly done with great appreciation for the amount of time that goes into it. We truly do not take that lightly. That being said, let me also support Susie's premise when she said that there would be a great presentation by the high school and by the principal. One of the things that I think we're looking forward to in the next sort of step to this is to continue what was started last week, and perhaps with meeting with the 8th graders. Having an 8th grader myself, I appreciate both the steps that the conversation with them as well as what occurred last Thursday. But continuing the community conversation around this, which I think frankly is only healthy. I really applaud the parents and the faculty members that brought ideas forward. The community itself. This is not something that we should shy away from. It's not something we should be anything but excited about. And I couldn't agree with you more, AJ. This is robust. When we're talking about change, when we're talking about something that can be dynamic, that is going to have an impact, we should have a community conversation about it. We should say, hey, stop. Let's think about this. Let's ask. Let's inquire. Let's be inquisitive. Let's debate. So all of those things really make the conversation stronger. So a sincere thank you for one more step in that being this evening. We certainly do look forward to, in the next day or two, having the announcement about when the parent forum would be somewhere between, obviously now and February 12th. We certainly do not want to, we want to be able to balance the needs of all of the work that needs to take place behind the scenes. So we certainly appreciate there's another dynamic that goes on with scheduling for next year and all of that. That's not an easy task either. But certainly our capacity to be heard more and to really have a greater opportunity to have parents and community members ask questions directly of you. Some of the questions here tonight were certainly channeled by members of the school committee we've been emailed and so forth. But I think it is, we picked up some themes, both themes that you've both spoken to, as well as themes that we've heard, and I'm particularly impressed, really, by a number of the themes. So, the biggest, or at least in my view, the biggest is the connection to research and the connection to our core values. And that is very, very meaningful to me anyways, as both a parent and a member of the committee who's been really supportive of the growth mindset piece, the core value piece for a number of years now. So with that in mind, again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We look forward to the parent forum and continuing this conversation at this table on February 12th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving now, the consent agenda. Mr. Callahan, we have a motion.
Oh, boy, do we have a motion.
It's a mouthful.
Okay. I move that we approve the minutes of December 4th, 2018, joint meeting between the Town Council and School Committee, the minutes of the regular school committee meeting of December 11th, 2018, the minutes of the school committee retreat of December 15th, 2018, and accept the minutes of the December 3rd, 2018 school committee Finance and Facilities Subcommittee, the minutes of the December 6th, 2018 school committee Student Services Subcommittee, the minutes of the January 3rd, 2019 school committee Student Services Subcommittee, and the minutes of the January 7th, 2019 joint meeting between the School Committee Finance and Facilities Subcommittee and the Town of Wakefield Finance Committee as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Don't ask me to repeat it.
What was the third thing you said? Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Moving on to item number 7, the chair's comments. We are going to, at this time, invite our friends regarding Blatts Field. We have a couple of representatives that are probably out in the other room. So while they're coming in, let me do very quickly item number C, school committee appointments process to the Human Rights Commission. Just very, very quickly, what I'll ask, a bit of a consensus from the committee, is, as you know, the Human Rights Commission, which had a wonderful Martin Luther King Day program on Monday of this week, by the way, certainly deserving of great congratulations and thanks for that. Members of the Human Rights Commission are appointed by the school committee and by the town council. The appointments that are up this coming spring, we will be asked to make one appointment this coming spring, and the town council will be making 2 appointments this coming spring. Town council is asking to change the application process to include 2 things. There previously had not been a baseline expectation. They are asking for now a full resume for the individuals that are seeking appointment, as well as a specific letter of intent regarding why one would seek an appointment. We have the Human Rights Commission, as you know, they go through the process of recruiting. They go through an interview process. They then make recommendations back to each of the appointing boards. What's being asked of us is to really support the town council in also asking that any applicant for the Human Rights Commission provide a resume and a letter of intent. It seemed like a no-brainer, but we don't have a process around that, as it's the Human Rights Commission's appointment process. So that's what I'm asking. Would we be supportive of the town council taking the lead, and also expect the same of anyone applying to one of our seats?
So in other words, the process would be identical.
Correct. Yeah, right now, there is no actual requirement for what one someone can simply submit their name. Tom would like to be on there's no then expectation of what you do to apply. So there's, they want to add to, both the Human Rights Commission and the Town Council will discuss this, want to add some heft to the application by having someone, an interested person, submit an application, a letter of intent and a resume. Yes,
I
Colleen?
have a question. So resume and application are kind of different, right? So.
Well, it's not an application. I apologize. I
Yeah.
did say that. I meant a letter of intent.
So just a letter of intent
And
along with a resume?
Yes.
Okay, so my concern with that would be that someone might feel that they wouldn't step up to join such a commission because maybe they're just, not feeling that they're qualified enough. Maybe they are, but, when providing a resume, that sort of, just adds another layer. What we traditionally think of as a resume, I guess. So that would be my only concern, would be that we would, maybe lose some interested applicants because they kind of feared that part of it and didn't feel like they were qualified to put forth something like that when maybe their resume doesn't speak to their passion to be on such a commission. So it's not the appointment to the school committees, it's the HRC alone, right? Not the HRC members that we then appoint. Right, because we have HRC members that are liaisons to the school committee or whatnot.
Well, we appoint
Or
three
we-
representatives to the HRC.
We do, okay,
And the
okay.
town council
I'm always
appoints three.
confused about that,
Yep.
okay.
The town
Yeah.
council appoints three, but
Okay.
to bring some similarity to the process,
Yeah.
is the HRC themselves are the vetting body, if you will, that they receive the applications, they conduct the interviews, and then they bring forward a certain number of names for our consideration, and to the town council for their consideration.
Yeah, I think the process should be consistent, absolutely. But that's, I spoke with someone off the record, about that process and, sort of just what that means. When you have to submit a resume, and if you're already going through an interview process, after you submit a letter of intent, then maybe someone's more likely to just, submit their application. It may sound, I don't know, I just don't, you don't want people to be turned away from joining such a thing, where we're not electing them and we're not hiring them, and I don't know if anyone else has any.
Yeah, Chris?
Maybe because I kind of went through this process because I'm on the permanent building committee. So I had been appointed once or twice, but then the last time to be reappointed, I had to submit all of this paperwork,
Right.
the willingness to serve, as well as, a resume saying, why I should, be reappointed. And it was a little intimidating.
Yes, that's the word I was
But
trying to get
at the same time, I think it helped me understand why, what I really felt I was going to contribute. And it really wasn't that difficult. And I think the whole intent is to just, you shouldn't be appointed to a committee of any sort or just because you're a nice guy. You've got to bring something to the table. You shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And they're just asking, what do you bring to the table? And you don't need a master's degree in construction or, to be on the permanent building committee. But, and nor would you necessarily have to have a lot of experience with the subject matter of the Human Rights Commission, but you may need to have shown community involvement and
Right.
And I think you can make it worse than it is, because it just runs right in your
Yeah, I think it's the
head.
perception, but
Yeah.
I understand, I think that it is important
But consistency,
to-
I think, is important. I don't think it would be fair
Yeah,
for the members appointed by the town council to have to go through one process and the ones through the school committee a different process.
should be the same,
It should be the
for
same.
sure.
Amy?
I just wanted to
say that I agree with Colleen and her issues or concerns about the whole process.
Okay. Ann?
Well, I think putting together a resume is kind of small in comparison to the requirements of the position. So I think it's something that I would like to have as part of the requirements for being considered for an appointment. I mean, a resume is simply just documentation of your activities, and a lot of us have them, but they're not necessarily updated. You know, so you can just
Someone like
update it
me,
real
I wasn't
quick.
in the corporate world, I had no reason to have a resume ready, but, I guess if you can't put the effort into creating the resume, then maybe you shouldn't apply for the appointment.
I mean,
You
I
know?
guess that's sort of what I'm thinking of. It's not a, maybe we call it something else, you know, but sort of a list of
Qualifications.
attributes and experiences, you know. I mean, that's what a resume is.
Well, yeah, that is usually what is demonstrated in a resume, is one's
Right.
history, one's work history, one's education, one's volunteerism.
Right. I mean, and I think about HRC in particular, they're busy, and they have a lot of responsibility, and they do it on a shoestring budget. So, you know, there's definitely a commitment involved with that particular group. So I'd be in favor of following the same requirements as town council.
Colleen, one of the things that you said a moment ago that struck me, and I think I certainly agree, that putting together the letter of intent is perhaps more meaningful to me anyways than the resume would. I wouldn't certainly want anyone to be intimidated to the point where they're turned off.
Right.
But the letter of intent can speak to one's enthusiasm or one's passion to be able to communicate that. And you're not going to, you know, just like going toward any interview, you're not going to get to the interview unless you submit an application of sorts that has a cover letter to it. You know, you're not going to get in front of the hiring party, you know, the hiring person, unless you have an interesting cover letter that speaks to why you want that position, be it volunteer or otherwise. I think one of the things that we may recall from the last round of appointments that we had, at least I recall, is that when the documents came to us, when the names came to us rather, there were really no documents. There was we got 3 names.
Right.
And we didn't get this real deep background on why these persons and who we, you know, and then we all were looking them up in, you know, Facebook or something and figuring out who these people are. Well, I think being able to have someone's self-statement about why they want to be on a particular board is really the first round of what we should be considering, their own words. So I would hope that we don't make it intimidating, that we make it, you know, raising the bar certainly, to Chris's. I think if someone wants to be on, to be thoughtful, to be thought for a commission, to being appointed by the school committee or the town council, that shouldn't be considered insignificant, should be considered something of value. That someone should go through a process that speaks to their readiness and their preparedness for that job. So I didn't have a motion in mind. I was really hoping for a consensus, but certainly I don't know if such a thing exists, so maybe we do need a vote. Do we have consensus or do we not? I mean, I want to obviously to be mindful of how are we going to react to the Human Rights Commission when they're asking for what is our expectation of applicants.
You want a straw poll for consistency?
Sure. The vice chair is suggesting a straw poll.
What does that mean? Sorry.
It's on the official vote, just, you know, your thoughts. Do you think you would be leaning towards?
Oh, yeah, okay.
I would be leaning towards consistency.
I'm leaning towards consistency, and I don't want to create opposition. I just feel like we should be mindful of the language. That,
Okay.
you know, when I've talked to other, just our community members, that one of the things that may hold them back from participation in, it could be even running for a school committee, you know? These are the things that might hold them back, is they don't feel like they're qualified enough, when of course they probably are. So I don't want it to create inconsistency or opposition, but I just feel like it's something to be mindful of going forward. Maybe we look at that letter of intent and the interview process with more weight than, okay, you are A, B, C, D, E. And like Ann said, a resume for such a commission is gonna look different than a professional resume would look, perhaps.
Perhaps.
If you don't have one or the other, right? So.
But I think when one seeks either a job or an office, appointed or otherwise, you need to demonstrate your value to that.
For sure,
And
yeah.
you have to be able to communicate what you're going to bring to the table and why someone should consider, voting to appoint you or voting in the election for you.
Absolutely.
RJ?
I mean, I'm in favor of the consistency.
Okay. Ann, Amy? Okay, so we'll communicate that then to the Human Rights Commission and the Town Council. Very good, thank you. Okay. I thought that would be a lot quicker. I apologize to you guys. I thought it was, they're gonna walk down the hall, this is gonna be over. So that was my gross misjudgment of reading the room. Okay, yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, great. Well, anyways, we welcome our friends back with the Blatz Field conversation, recognizing that a month ago you were before us and gave a great presentation in a different forum, but now we're thrilled to have invited back that you and a number of colleagues and are looking to present. We'll have a conversation around that. So certainly welcome. Welcome back.
Thanks for having us back. Let's see, Tom Purcell was going to be with us. He's down with the flu, so he's been an assistant high school softball coach for the past 3 or 4 years. And he's a local guy, firefighter. Dave Story is a construction manager. Been in the construction business for about 30 years or so. I'm an architect. I've been in the design and construction business for about 35 years. You can tell Dave and I have the shoes on that, we work in the field, so.
Dave, you want to?
So we must know.
Please do, Dave.
This should be a little easier than your other conversations earlier.
Yeah. It might not be as fun.
We want to make all conversations easy.
Just try to bear with us.
Thank you.
The slides, for the most part, are going to be the same as what you saw last time. So I'll just kind of fly through them just to kind of remind you of where we are.
We also have these in our packets. Yep.
Okay, let's see if I can remember how to do this. Okay. This is a slide that I added. I just wanted to let you know kind of what we're doing, that we weren't just, some country bumpkin saying, I think we could put a field here. We were looking at the town of Wakefield assessors maps, the state graphic information surveys, the Woodville architecture and engineering drawings that cover part of the field, Google Earth, Bluebeam, the National Federation of State High School Associations, Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic Association. I also, the rest of them are kind of like people I want to thank. I was talking with HMFH Architects, with Laura Wernick and Vasilios. Can you hear me okay? Sorry. And SMMA Architects and Engineers, Lorraine Finnegan, Alan DeHaan. Peter Lukasik, who's a landscape architect with SMMA. Jeff Steichman, Architectural Art, did the rendering for us. And Bob Romano, the Concom, who helped me out with some environmental issues. And our cost estimate came from Sports Turf Specialties of Rentham. This is your basic Google Earth view of the campus with north up and south down. You can see all the facilities, all the sports facilities, no surprises there. What I did for the presentation is I turned it around because typically baseball fields, people look at them with home plate down. So that's the way all our drawings are, so I just flipped the whole site around. These white squiggly lines are the property lines from the assessor's maps superimposed, just so you can see how everything sits. And again, that's the Woodville site, and that red circle is approximately where the diamond is. Oops, there we go. Oh, I guess you didn't want to see that one. There we go. This was a grading plan. We were just looking to see how the field was situated. This was located by the Carol Johnson Associates. We also were looking at Judith Nitch engineering drawings for other boundaries and site utilities. This is an aerial view of Blatz, the existing view. I highlighted the existing fence between the woods. That fence will stay. Everything that we're proposing to do is inside the fence. It wouldn't go beyond. And we're basically, oops. Yeah, and so I went a little crazy with some aerial photos of Blatz. You can see it's a nice area. It would make a good ball field. It's just been run down, and it just hasn't been taken care of. So there we go. This is the new field superimposed over that. We used a 200-foot fence for the outfield with a 10-foot warning track. We've got the required 25-foot space between the foul lines and the out-of-bounds obstructions type stuff. We have dugouts, which are basically, I'll show you soon, they're like the Melrose benches, enclosed in chain link fence with a roof over the top. And next to each is a bullpen. There'd be a new backstop. The existing backstop would be taken down. And the infield mix, infield dirt would be a new mix. That's part of the problem with Blatz now, is it's like talcum powder. And there's no water or anything nearby to water the field down with. And when I was coaching Little League, I wound up bringing gallons of water with me and a shovel, so that every couple of innings, some people remember that, every couple of innings I'd go out there with the water and water the pitcher's mound and move the dirt around to try to make it so that it was flat again.
Some of us thought he was cheating.
Well, you know, I never did it when we were playing Dave's team, except for when our team was pitching. And this is a sketch of how everything lays out. It's basically a schematic design. This is the existing diamond that you see in the aerial photos, and we're talking about shifting it over to where we have that sort of orange line. So it's basically going up the third base line about 25 feet. Again, that'd be a new fence out along the outfield, and it would just be new fencing around the dugouts, the backstop, and the bullpen. This is Pine Banks Park. I had mentioned before that it's very similar to what we're proposing. This is from the outfield. This whole field's enclosed in the fence. Ours wouldn't need to have the entire field enclosed. It would just be around the benches. This doesn't have a roof over the dugouts, but the fenced-in area at about 6 feet is what we'd be doing. This is the roof, the type of roof system that we'd be using. And again, we'd still have the 6-foot fence in front of it so that any line drives and foul balls and stuff like that don't wind up in the wrong place. And we have the two-tier bench. And this is pretty much what the bullpens would look like. The ones that we're proposing right now, we just have them extending on beyond from the bench area. But again, we're in schematic design, so there's room to possibly move around a little bit. Whoops, I missed that one, huh? Oh, yeah, okay, so this is the plan that we talked about previously. Again, just showing the layout that we're proposing. And this is the way the field would kind of sit next to the existing ramp at Woodville. You can see it's pretty much in the same location, just slid over a little bit, and it's like new. And it has a lot of potential for, you know, vibrant activity. One of the things I was thinking about earlier today, one of the things that would happen here is it makes it a lot more accessible to the school. And a few years ago, when my daughter was a freshman, they had their first tournament game at the end of the season that they were playing, and the baseball players all came and were yelling and stuff, and they were great. The team loved it. It was fantastic. And it was especially good, my daughter said, when she was up at bat, because Coach Q was yelling at her, and she loved Coach Q except for when she was at bat, because he was he'd always be telling her the wrong stuff to do, and she'd try to tune him out. So, but with the baseball players all yelling, she could see his mouth moving, but she couldn't hear anything, so it was great. But anyhow, that's that kind of thing you can have here. You know, it's easy for other teams to come over and support you and that sort of thing. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what we're proposing. If you have any questions, we're happy to.
Part of the proposal that I believe we have this time, that either we didn't see last time or it wasn't in our packets, was the cost estimate, which I believe, Mr. Story, you had, your name is on it anyway, so I'm assuming.
It was
you
sent
had
to me, yes.
Could you speak to that?
It's a company that was referred to us by the Red Sox, and also the Little Leaguers used them down at Maple Way last year to resurface and recondition that field. I reached out to Dennis. You know, I sent him the aerial view of where we're, you know, looking for the field to be renovated. And again, it's a budget number. You know, it's not like he came down here and did any test samples of the soil and did any grading or, you know, shot any grades.
We told him we didn't need the $8,000 foul poles.
I'm not sure if that, in that proposal there is literally from, I think it was Brookline, where they had an $8,000 foul pole and a $60,000 dugout, but, you know, we're not proposing that we, you know, should get that. I think we can do without that. So that's a very recent, this past year that those numbers.
Dated September.
Yeah. And again, you know, girls playing down at Vets, I mean, albeit Vets is a really nice field, it's really beautiful to drive by, it looks awesome at night in the summer when guys are down there drinking beer and playing softball, but it's not a, you know, it's not a girls' field.
No.
You know, it's not, and, you know, the girls don't have an equally adequate facility to participate in at Wakefield High School. And Bob mentioning an on-campus field and the school support that you would get coming to watch those games would be incredible. We've been involved with softball for a long time, and, you know, support the girls' softball. We go and try to watch them down at Vets, but you can't get down there to park to see the girls play. And, you know, I think it's a travesty that, you know, I have to potentially, when my daughter comes up to the high school, count on high school students to drive her to a game, because that's what goes on now. You know, we're allowing our 14, 15-year-olds potentially getting in cars with 16-year-olds to go play a softball game, because that's how the girls get to the field. And then they practice at that same field. And I just think it's overdue that an on-campus field is not a lot for us to be asking for. And we hope that this is the right venue, because we did ask DPW. They said it was on school grounds, so it was a school thing. And I asked Dennis, Dan McGrath, who's a great guy. He goes, it's not me. He goes, I only schedule fields. So we were pointed in you guys' direction, and here we are.
Well, so again, thank you both for coming back and being open to the dialogue that we couldn't have had last time by the protocols in place. But
Yeah, no worries.
so this certainly is the correct forum. It's not the last stop in the process. It's certainly one of the first, that's for sure. I think that it is clear that what is also very long overdue is some equity around girls softball from a variety of perspectives, not the least of which is the quality of the field. So we've got some work to do there, which is some of the things I'm hopeful we'll be able to do that won't have a $196,000 price tag to them. I'm sure there are some things that the superintendent, the principal, and the athletic director can bring back to us for ideas and concepts that we can put in play for this upcoming season. Certainly, this type of work obviously is not 3 months away, nor is finding the financing for such a thing. And I think, we also have in larger play, and it's, I know you made mention of it in your remarks, Bob, as well as in your text, but it can't be understated that the larger conversation around the proposed new high school also should not be a non-starter, but it certainly has to be part of the larger consideration about exactly, at least for timing, not at all for equity. Equity, this is a no-brainer. We've got to get there. That is absolutely long overdue, taking care of our female athletes. So I think it's incumbent upon us for the next step, at least to come back to you with some thoughts and ideas. I don't think we want to be out of sync with you. That's not to say that the conversation shouldn't end tonight. It should only begin anew. But from here, I think we owe you some talking points back about what some ideas may be. Maybe even inviting some of your members into a smaller, less public sort of conversation about some brainstorming and some concepts around, what are some more, how do we break down more immediate needs with things that we need to do for the spring season versus things that need to sort of play themselves out, like the high school conversation. I don't say that to stop this, but I say that because it's real. That conversation is in play, and that's going to have an impact on anything that's done on this campus.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Is that in play because of the SOI you have to still do and not being able to spend money?
Not necessarily. Certainly.
I only bring that up. I went to the meeting,
Yeah.
and I
The
thought.
meeting
I
last
think that they're
week.
two separate,
Yeah.
two separate worlds.
But I know that there was talk about, not perhaps being able to spend money, like on the school, and I didn't know if this was being considered
It's
as
not a
part
matter
of
of
a
not
school.
being able to spend money. It's about how wisely such money would be spent.
Okay,
That if we were to find $196,000 and could wave some magic wands and have this in place, to have, fast forward 18 months, and we're building a new high school, and that becomes, frankly, a staging area or something for construction, that isn't particularly wise. That isn't a great use of resource.
I mean, if I was the general contractor, I'd be afraid of using that area, especially going between an elementary school and a parking lot of a high school to access that area when kids are being dropped off at all hours of the day, driving construction vehicles back and forth, using that as a staging area.
But I use that as an example. I don't use that as
That's fair enough.
the answer. But it certainly has to be, I mean, we're not at the feasibility stage yet. We're not even close to that in the condition that where we are now. We're almost restarting the process. So it's almost like to restart the process in an open, fair way. It's almost everything is on the table. And what is that going to look like? And to move forward with something that is so proximate to a larger campus, without that being sort of, have that as a sacred cow, is going to be hard to do in the near term. But that, again, isn't to say that this conversation stops because of that. This conversation, it should be part of that conversation. It should be, I think this is excellent timing for bringing this up. You may recall, in the same context, when we were doing the Galvin, we also had concurrent to that new fields. Whether the fields on this campus or the fields at the Galvin campus were all done as part of a larger context around that. So I don't see any reason at all why certainly a significant improvement and upgrade to the field itself would not be part of a larger upgrade to this campus. That's not to say that we don't have things we need to do for this year. Anyways, I'm sure other members of the committee might like to express thoughts. Chris?
You mentioned that you'd spoken to the recreation director and the parks director, and they both referred you back to the school committee.
Yep.
And I find that puzzling, because
We did too.
the school department, you know, may own the land, but we don't maintain the fields.
And nobody does.
Okay, well, let's talk about Landrigan. Okay,
The girls don't play on that.
could I finish?
Oh, I'm sorry.
The maintenance of Landrigan Field, even though that's a place where the high school plays, the maintenance of that field falls under the jurisdiction of the DPW. They operate all the equipment to dress the turf, and they maintain the whole facility. And the scheduling of that facility is done through the rec department. And I don't necessarily see how this would fall differently. I guess someone would have to explain to me why this would be different. Have you made an appointment to go to make your presentation to the town council? Have you spoken?
No,
with
this was the first step, because we had been directed
Okay.
to,
And
the school committee was the
Have you
first
had
step.
any conversation with Mr. Mayo?
I have
Personally,
not.
no.
No, he and I have not, I think Tom has, but,
So
not
I
recently.
guess that's kind of where we need to get more clarity, because it's the information you have now doesn't sit with what I understand, and I fully support your efforts, and I would like to see the field done in some matter, but I don't know that the school department even has the authority to undertake that, because it would not be, it's really kind of the town's
Yeah, we
Parks and
couldn't agree
Recreation,
more.
you know?
We thought it was a little odd as well.
So, so I would hope that you'd continue the conversation, you know, if you're looking for our blessing for the project, you know, to move to, if you move on to the next step, that's fine, you know, I fully support that myself. But I think there are a lot more steps we need more clarity on, as to really who does this fall under.
Can I just, wouldn't this fall under, like, would it fall under capital requests?
It might fall under any number of places, you know? It could be, it could be a warrant at town meeting.
And that's why, I'm in agreement with Chris that this, from the school department, for us to add $196,000 to our budget, I think Mr. Mayo and DPW would say, no, there should be a separate warrant. It shouldn't be under the school department's budget, because
Right.
we get annual increases on our budget, and they don't want to build $196,000 into our budget that wouldn't be ongoing.
But who would sponsor the warrant?
I
Well,
think,
these
That's-
gentlemen could sponsor the warrant themselves.
Okay.
So, I mean, you probably will end up at town meeting with a warrant for funding, unless you're doing private funding, which I don't know that you are or you aren't, but you know, that's probably where you're gonna find yourselves. You know, the town meeting is gonna have to really vote on that, because it's not a school department function, as far as my understanding.
No, and if I may, one of the things that I meant earlier when I said that, you know, we should get back to you with some ideas, is exactly to help sort of parse out what some next steps may be. And again, that's not to say that you can't call anyone or make appointments to move forward as well, but I think there is a fine line. I think everyone is correct. We do not, the school department doesn't own, if you will, the properties. We have control of them and we have jurisdiction, but we don't, you know, our budget didn't rebuild Landrigan, our budget didn't rebuild Beasley. Those were independent funding sources coming right out of town meeting.
That may have been why we were directed to see you first, you know.
Yeah,
just
but
basically-
the types of things that are ours, if I may, the type of things that are ours to initiate or react immediately to, which is what I'm most interested in the near term, are some of the equity issues. The equity issues to take care of our female athletes. That's what I'm interested in having the superintendent, the principal, and the AD bring back to us.
Right, and so,
Not that this isn't critical, because it is, but I'm interested in the types of things that we as a committee absolutely can take some action on or at least some reaction to, and certainly around equity. Ms. Lyons?
So I think if I can just share some of the conversations that I've had, after your first presentation, but even before that, Amy and I had a conversation about the equity piece and how, it's the Vets field compared to Blatt's, what would it take to get a playable field on campus, right? And so, one of the things that I did is I had a conversation with Dennis Fazio about what can be done. Can Blatt's be a playable field this spring? And in my conversation with him, I felt more confident that he certainly feels like we can certainly spruce up Blatt's and make it playable. And so I don't know what that means, right? I haven't walked the field, and I know that these things can kind of escalate very quickly, but I also know that Dennis Fazio doesn't fool around. I mean, he's a pretty squared away guy, and what he invests time in and kind of puts his stamp on is usually coming out, better than it certainly started. So I think of this in terms of two parts. One is kind of the picture that we see, right? And so I think that's what we want, right? But I think that listening to my colleagues around town meeting or how that happens, that might be the next step there. But in regard, what I think about more immediately is the spring, like right, which is months away. What are we doing? How can we help? How can we support? And in my conversation with Dennis, I feel like I think he's prepared to help make Blatt's playable. I've also talked with the AD about the possibility of trying to get some grant funding that might be able to support the new field in a longer, kind of a bigger picture as well. And so that's just a very quick. But I think we're in agreement around the equity piece and something on campus. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, it's.
I think there's a balance, right, that we need to strike between, well, there appears to be a balance that a lot of people want to strike between this notion of a new high school and how it would affect Blatt's Field, and should we wait or shouldn't we? And I don't think we should wait, because maybe we don't spend $200,000, but I think we should make that field excellent, because that's what the boys have, and I want the girls to have the same thing. And I don't necessarily see that as spending good money after bad if, let's say, we do get the high school. I see it as supporting the girls in a manner that they deserve, and that's my opinion. Do I have money in my pocket to put forward? I don't, but that is, I want to weigh that idea of the new high school, but I don't want that to define the discussion. I think the discussion is, how do we get Blatt's Field up to par ASAP? Not up to par.
Well.
Up to, what's above par? Bogey?
No, well.
Birdie? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going the wrong way.
Going the wrong way.
I mean, I just have one comment. Obviously, it's long overdue. Thank you for the presentation. I do feel like we should be mindful of making sure that we have a field that the girls can use on campus 100%. And getting back to the process, I'm just wondering if someone could remind me, when someone came in last March maybe about the backstop for the boys, he presented here, but then what happened? What did he do? Where did he go? Because it happened.
Town meeting.
Town meeting.
No, I think it was the capital. Didn't it go on the capital plan? It went on the capital plan, and then Rick Stinson presented as part of capital to the entire town meeting. So it was part of the capital presentation at town meeting. It was approved with all the other capital projects at once. It wasn't an individual town meeting article.
Was that the 200,000 that
Yeah.
you referenced?
Yeah.
That's the same, okay, that was one of my questions.
So I
Okay.
think when the Landrigan and Beasley were redone, those were individual separate town meeting articles, but I wasn't here at the time, but I believe that those were individual separate town meeting articles where they weren't voted as part of the entire capital budget.
Okay.
But I think there's also another step. I mean, if we're looking at town funds, we need to get before FinCom, Finance Committee, and Mr. Butler's here. Maybe he can help us with that, but we have to get before FinCom, we have to get before Town Council, and we have to get before the DPW. But this is a good starting point. I think the school committee should endorse this if that's what they want to do, to move this to the next step. I'm sorry if I spoke out of turn.
Absolutely.
No, that's good. Colleen?
Sort of to support Ann's statement, in the balance between the new high school, when and if that happens, I guess I'm looking more to like the students now, right? So they don't stay here for the next 20 years, and they unfortunately won't get to see our new high school. And I'd like that we support the current students, and, you know, how fast it happens, you know, they aren't gonna be playing here, you know, for 20 years, and, you know, I feel like we should be taking care of the students that are our current students and that are moving in the next year, and the next 2 years and 3 years, however long this waiting period is before we know, you know, where we're heading to in a direction of a new high school. So that's sort of, you know, Ann's point, and I feel like we're not really doing them justice saying, you know, well, you're just gonna have to wait a little bit, but they're playing now, you know, and they're students here now. So thank you for your presentation again, and I agree with the conversation that just happened. I think that, you know, it's our job to sort of endorse this project, and in whatever manifestation it comes into the spring, the energy is there around it, and hopefully continue to move it on.
So, what I can see, you know, thinking out loud, is sort of, at a minimum, is sort of a tier approach. Listening, what I would like to request to the superintendent is to come back at our next meeting with some thinking around what we need, or perhaps even input from yourselves or even the girls tonight. What do we need to start the spring 2019 season? You know, even when we're talking about the dollars and cents, that's still a process that is not 2 months away. And so I think the type of thing, when I'm saying a double-tiered approach, what can we do now in the immediate term to bring some immediate equity or some near-term equity versus what's going to take us some time? I mean, even going back to Amy's question on the Walsh field piece, that was not a one-year project. I mean, some of those guys are working on that for a couple of years. Right. So, you know, I don't want to say that things take time, but the money piece is going to take some time to line up, and that's not a couple months away. I don't mean to be anything other than realistic and honest. That's not a March season opener. So perhaps, Doug, if that's a fair thing to ask of you, maybe reconnecting with Dennis and the AD on what, and certainly with the softball players and anyone that wants to input. Shoot us an email, shoot the superintendent an email, or talk to the AD about the types of things that can be brought forward, that we can put some energy behind. And then also, I would think perhaps what we could also do offline is be able to make some outreach about maybe maybe a recommendation on where your next stop could be. And with that next stop, perhaps at our next meeting, we could be prepared to endorse this proposal for when they go to the town council or the finance committee or any number of stops along the way. I mean, this is not going to be a one-stop show, but I think the energy behind it, and I'm sure the energy that we want to support is pretty strong. And again, that's not to say I don't want to sound anything other than realistic about the larger conversation around the high school. I don't want that to stop anything, but we also can't not have the conversation in the vacuum. We have to appreciate the larger activity that's going to take place on this campus, hopefully within the next 36 to 48 months, if all goes well. But that's not to stop something, that's just to say it needs to be there needs to be a larger conversation. Yes, RJ.
I would just add that I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, the field is right there, ready to go for us, and I think it would be great for the girls. And I think that if we can talk to Mr. Mayo, maybe office hours or town council meetings, whatever it takes, and then just kind of keep us in the loop about next steps. Doug will do his thing talking to Dennis as well, and whatever we can do to support it. But at the very least, if we can spruce up the fields, like he said, but ideally, I think we would all want this, and I think any kind of grants and funding you can get along the way, maybe private-public grants available, that would definitely help the cause as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's grants available. There's one that's already been started, but they also want to have some skin, you have to have some skin in the game too. I mean, they're not just gonna give you a $200,000 grant to Wakefield to build the field. You know, I mean, I agree, the grants are available, but we need to have some skin in the game.
Some of the questions are, how much is the town putting in? You know,
Okay, yeah.
That sort of thing.
And I believe Brendan's already started that process. You know, I think that's where the where
That's
it's,
through Major League Baseball?
yeah, I think that's where it kind of gets stalemated, because there's no
Match.
input of
Right.
how much money, if any, the town would be willing to do.
Yeah, and they also are asking for budgets, like what's your current maintenance budget for the field, you know, for this area, or whatever, and like, you know,
So
we don't know.
You know, we met with Brendan about it briefly during the summer. I mean, this has been,
Yeah.
we've been talking about this for a while.
maintenance back at DPW.
I'm sorry.
Maintenance of that field with DPW.
Yeah, they were looking for specific numbers that are, you know,
The DPW could
spent.
probably help us by giving us estimates of what those numbers are.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
what they
could
could
use the
do,
num-
yeah.
Right.
They could use the numbers from Walsh, if you will, to say that that's what they spend here at Blatz in
Right.
order to, you know, get the funding.
If I may.
Mike?
For our end-of-year report, the town provides us with financial data on what the DPW from every department spends on our properties. They don't break it down by field, but we could probably do some formula around that, that if we have 8 fields and they're charging us X amount of dollars, not charging us, but reporting that they spent X amount of dollars, we could do some simple math around it, just to get an estimate on what the field maintenance would be, but I think that might be something that I may already have, if we wanted to dig a little deeper.
Great.
So it sounds, I'm sorry, but it sounds like, you know, these two gentlemen, not that it sounds like, these two gentlemen have put in a lot of volunteer hours in putting this proposal, sort of gathering support, and you're sort of steaming ahead. And I feel like, you know, we owe it to them, given, I think, kind of our universal support here, to really lay out some real specifics for them in terms of kind of what they need, because you know.
That would be great.
You're just kind of doing whatever you want to do, not whatever you want to do, whatever other people are telling you.
Yeah, exactly.
And unfortunately, you know, I'm a little new to this, so I'm not as knowledgeable about the processes, but,
Well, that's what I was suggesting to do.
okay, because I think that would be. Exactly, I know we don't have it today, but I want to make sure that we're very specific with kind of the process. Time is valuable.
I'm just wondering.
Oh, no, Amy?
I was just wondering if you have any questions in regards to where you go next to. I just want to make sure you guys are comfortable with the next step and, you know, maybe communicate with us to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, that's good, because I'm not exactly sure. I think we're going back to you to find out what the next, you know, what's next.
That's what I'm offering.
Yeah.
Certainly,
That's
again,
what I'd like to
we
do.
can't prevent you from continuing any conversation you feel is valuable, please have. I'm suggesting that the superintendent will come back to us at the next meeting with some ideas around getting ready for spring 2019, and we can have a larger conversation about at least a process, and perhaps also have a vote to endorse the project, so when you do go to town council and finance committee and capital planning, that you would have the support of the school committee.
Okay.
Yes, please, no, come on up, absolutely. No.
I just think it's one thing you guys are kind of confusing on is that
Julia, you
There's
need
like
to
two
speak in the
separate-
microphone, honey.
Oh,
Come up to the big table.
Please do.
But it's like two separate like issues that we wouldn't want to just spruce up Blatz for this year, because I think we all would prefer to just play on Vets again rather than play on like a half redone Blatz.
Yeah.
Like if we're gonna spend money on Blatz, I would want to just redo the whole thing and play on Vets for now. Maybe if you do have like a little extra, put the money into Vets, because this year we're already set on playing on Vets. Like I don't think any of us are expecting to have a brand new field on Blatz this year at all.
Okay.
And I don't think it's a big deal that we would have to do that, but in the future, I think this is just like the overall move to redo Blatz and not spend like, put a Band-Aid on it rather than just like, we'll play out the rest of the season this year, fine. If you have the extra money, spend it on Vets, not on like
Next
doing
time,
a little
it's
bit
gonna
to
start with
Blatz.
That is incredibly valuable information. Thank you for speaking, that's awesome, thank you, very helpful. Yes, no, please, could you stand?
Yes, if I could just ask for, no, I'm just looking for clarity, and that I would like to request that we walk away tonight with an official endorsement if we could, so that we can then go forward and keep adding a step that's gonna be productive, whether it be Richard Stinson or Mayo. I'm happy to contribute in that, but I think I want to get each step further, because we've been waiting for this for a long time, and I agree with the girls. And I would like to know too, at Vets, do we need anything for safety purposes for them in the dugouts and stuff with those balls that come back at them? It may be more beneficial to make sure that they're in a safe space playing at Vets, and then we know that we're moving forward in a better step to get them to a field for their completed year at this high school, like you said. I mean, we've waited a long time for the girls to have this equal thing going on, and we'd like to see them finish in a good space, you know, a good field. Whereas I think the girls are saying that if you were to maybe increase a playing field area, like the dirt area that needs to be done, it may be at a high enough expense that we're better off to be planning for a full amount to get the field done for the following year. Does that help?
It is, and in fact, if I may, this is exactly the type of conversation that we want to spur, that I'm saying we will put back on the next committee agenda with feedback from the athletic department, and please come back in 2 weeks. We aren't able tonight to provide, to take a vote. It wasn't cast on the agenda as doing such. But I think we're prepared to walk away with some homework, if you will, superintendent and us. And certainly, please, it'll be on the agenda 2 weeks from tonight. We can have a dialogue similar to this again, and certainly take an endorsement vote with some ideas about next steps. Yes, please.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So, so earlier in the discussion, Superintendent Lyons, I think that you said that you discussed that the field could be playable for this year. And I wanted to know kind of what guidelines were under playable, because right now the field is it's borderline dangerous. I don't really, I'm trying to sugarcoat it a little bit, but it's like.
You don't have to sugarcoat it. You can just put it right out there. I think, in my conversation with the person that is responsible and is in charge of the fields, who's amazing at his job, and he's super passionate about it, okay? He said to me, we're gonna spruce up that field and get it to a level where the girls can play on it. Now, I haven't walked the field, right? And maybe that's what I need to do with you guys, is get out and walk the field after school one of these days, right? So my office is connected to your school, so it's not like I am 100 miles away, right? So we can walk the field, we can take a look. So, but like I said, but if the feedback is, the plan this season is to kind of play on Vets, that my wonder is, my question for Mr. Kent is Blatz going to be used at all? Is it going to be a practice field, or is it? Right, and so.
We also have Maple Way as well, which we just redid.
What's that?
We We also
Sorry,
have Maple Way,
sorry.
but it's not, I don't know if it's sizable to play JV on or not.
Yeah, we're trying to get them to move the fence.
Put the fence
so
in the
that
right
it will be-
location.
Yeah, if the fence is in the right location.
Yeah. So if it's going to be a JV field, it sounds like, based on your feedback, that it still needs a lot of love and care.
Yes.
Right? And so no matter who's playing on it, as a JV field, varsity field, it sounds like minimally there needs to be some work done to the field. Is that fair?
Yeah.
We could probably even invite Mr. Fazio to come walk with us, who, like I said, he's amazing, right? He's a great guy. And I think, he can also maybe give us some insight into what he's thinking about. And so, but that might be helpful for JV. It's not forwarding the conversation around a new field, but it's just kind of getting us, it's a plan for the spring. And I heard a couple of you say there's kind of a few parts to this. There's like two parts. There's this spring, and then there's kind of moving forward. So, and I feel like we need to have both of those conversations simultaneously, right? Like, what are we doing? And it should be common and understood by you and your parents. Like, what are we doing? What's the plan? Where are people playing? What are the schedules? What do fields look like? And are we good to go, right? And that should be predictable, and there should be kind of good communication around that, not only from me, but from Mr. Kent as well. And I think he's going to be kind of helpful in this as well. But, yeah.
Just to add like another insight,
Yeah.
I also help with umpiring with Mr. Donahue, and just like what I've noticed over the past 2-3 years that I've been doing it is like the decrease in interest for softball.
Yeah.
Like, used to be when we were younger, like you couldn't
Back
get
in the
enough
day.
teams to hold everybody.
Yeah.
And we would all go and watch all the high school games.
Yeah.
The field was just so much better then.
Yeah.
And we would, but I feel like so many kids are just losing their interest because we don't even like playing the little leagues on flats. I
I
think.
mean, it's a lot funner to watch like lacrosse play on Galvin than it is to watch us play on
Nobody
bats.
really
Yeah.
comes
I mean,
to
it's like
watch us
feels like it's
anymore.
like 10 degrees in March when we play at bats and the
Yeah.
wind off the lake.
That's, Vets is the environment there isn't too friendly in the spring.
Yeah, Vets doesn't warm up until mid-June.
And then it's like 90.
Yeah.
And we lose all our balls in the lake.
We waste a lot of money on balls in the lake. $7 a ball.
Yeah. So there's not a lot of disagreement, I think, from the adults in this room that, having something on campus is really critical. And so I don't think that there's a lot of disagreement there. So,
I just think that we shouldn't like rush the process and like trying to fix it this year because it's
Wait.
been like an ongoing problem. So I think it should be done right and once rather than trying to fix it a little bit at a time.
are you a junior?
I'm a senior, so I won't be seeing any of it probably. but-
Well, we might be hiring you.
So at our next meeting, the girls are gonna be at the table. You're incredibly well-spoken and articulate and knowledgeable. And it has been, it's been really,
Yeah.
we've learned as much about your current experience as we did from the gentleman about big picture future. So
Yeah, I'm glad
really-
they spoke
Really
up.
proud of you girls.
There's
Yeah.
something that Julie.
Whoops.
I'm
Yes,
sorry, there's
man,
something
you
that I
had your-
wanted to talk, that Julie was talking about, that this kind of stems from it. It's like, in 2008, my 24-year-old daughter was starting to play in the senior league. And that was the first time I heard somebody say that, because I think I asked, I said, why is Blatt so run down? Why aren't they taking care of Blatt? And they said, oh, they're gonna use this when they build it, they're building a new high school any day now. And they're gonna be.
Any day now.
Yeah, we need they need this area.
Yeah,
They'll never build, they'll never take care of it.
I was
Anyhow.
7.
Any day now. Yes, yeah, please, ma'am.
And I'm not sure if you know this, so if they go to the capital planning.
Yep.
Right, and they say to them, all right, under us, we'll go to the town meeting, put on the funding, 200,000, whatever that they need, it gets approved, and then do they just go and start building? Or
I
does
think,
someone give
I
it?
think there's a lot more to this.
But if
You
they
guys
get
can't
approved
just
by
build.
Right, but if
You
they
guys,
get approved
if
by
it's,
capital planning, is that the approval to build, and now they just have to go and get the money?
so with Massachusetts procurement law, anything over 50,000 will need to go out to bid. So you're automatically in the bid process. So to say there's a lot of steps to this process.
Okay.
Even if it's donated funds, it's still on town property, it would need to go out to the bid process. So there's a lot.
Of process, but similar to the backstop that they just did, they just went to town, got approved $200,000, right? So that 200,000 went to school committee or DPW? DPW, and DPW is taking care of the
Correct.
funds. Okay, so let's say they go to town, they put the 200,000 under capital planning, I'm assuming, yeah, capital planning, like you said, they put it under there. They approved all their, because it doesn't go under school committee, because then it's an ongoing line item,
Correct. It's a-
right? So you don't want that. So then, let's say it goes under capital planning, they get it, 200,000, who does that go to? DPW puts it out to bid?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So it's not like
More,
they,
more than,
like you
more
said,
than likely. I mean,
more
there
than
have been
likely.
times in the past where the town has put warrant articles into us, but not into our budget.
Right.
But we'll expend the money, they report it, but more than likely it would go into DPW because it is a field and they're more experts on it than anyone in our office.
Okay. So to go into the town to get the money for the approval, most likely would go under capital planning.
Yeah, but I think there's a step before that. I think you need FinCom. You're gonna want Finance Committee's recommendation to town meeting. Mr. Sherman will get up and go, the Finance Committee recommends favorable action. That's
And
what
then
you,
you would
that's what you want.
And then the school committee would recommend,
They would have already endorsed at
they
that
would
point.
have already endorsed it.
Yeah.
And then, Mayo would have to also endorse it?
Town council, I believe, also endorses. I don't know that they vote. Do they vote or do they endorse? They endorse also.
If anything goes to town meeting,
Has to
town
be voted
meeting
on.
that makes, is the
Yeah.
vote.
RJ?
Do we remember the gentleman that got the backstop, what his name was, by any chance? Because that'll be a good resource
It was
just as
from
far as the
tennis-
process.
It was actually from the tennis group, I think.
Oh, okay. Was it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
because they didn't want the balls going into the tennis
Chris and I
courts.
had a spirited discussion about that.
The first time they didn't get angry or something.
Right, yeah, they didn't do it right the first time, that's right.
Okay, well, we're digress. Yes, please.
This is like a final thought from all of us.
All right.
I think, like, I'm a junior, so it'd be awesome to be able to play like my senior year on a new field. Like that's like a dream.
All right.
But I think for all of us, you know, we would even just love coming back, like when we're older, watching the younger kids play. Like that's what we want to see. We want to see it inspire the younger kids. We want to see that where like they come to our games, they watch us. Oh, they want to play on the varsity team, like how it used to be. Like so, it's like a Friday night football game. Like there's no reason why it can't be. If we get a nice new field, like we inspire the younger children. Like I mean, I'd love to play on a field next year if it can be built in a year from now. But if not, like ultimately, we would just all love to see like in the next 2 years at least, you know, something better. And I think that's all of agreement. It's just like, you know.
Yeah, I think raising like interest in Little League is like one of our,
It's a huge-
this year we've been really like working on that, trying to do like clinics and stuff with the kids and stuff, and it's a lot easier to do whenever you have like a brand new field and it like looks the part.
Real field.
True, it also isn't very fun to
And you know
share.
what it's like when you go to another field, you have an away game in
Yeah.
Linfield or something like that, and
But it's also not fun to share the mounds with the men's league. I think people can speak to that, but yeah, there's like different mounds and like holes in between and beds because.
Do you guys have midterms tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yes. Those should go well.
Writing an essay, right?
So last question, how would the girls schedule the appointment with you to walk the field? I'm just trying to keep the steps moving.
Yeah,
So
they just
we're
gotta-
back here in 2 weeks.
Do you know when
These people in between.
There's snow right now.
There's snow right now.
I'll be gone tomorrow.
You could skate the field.
No, is it raining? You have to wait till it becomes.
Yeah, you won't see it until it's like dusty.
But we could, probably meet, to just to continue the conversation. And so where they would go, do you know where central office is?
Yes.
Beautiful. All you need to do is come there, and we can make a time.
And,
All
you
right.
know, actually, if I may, that may actually be a great thing if you could pull together a group, however large or small, to meet with the superintendent between now and the next meeting, because that could be part of his recommendation back to us as far as then seeking the school committee's endorsement. That, you know, the players have ideas, you girls have had these awesome ideas and comments just tonight. I'm sure you've been thinking about it quite a bit, but now if we're actually asking you to put some thinking behind it and meet with the superintendent, Mr. Kent, and obviously Coach.
We don't have
What are we going there? Not yet.
coach can be named later.
Let these girls go home and get ready for their
test.
Thank you.
All right,
But thank you for
Nice job.
looking.
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank
That's
you.
a good
Mr.
start.
Burnett,
Thank you.
Mr. Story, thank you.
very much.
Good
Thank you
start.
very much.
Thank you very much for the work, for the energy, and again, for bringing it forward. This is how things get done, right?
Great.
You're right to bed.
All right,
Maybe
thank you.
1 hour of studying.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night.
11? Double down? Double enough? What did I tell you? That would be out by 10. No.
Are you guys sleeping over tonight?
Nurse's office, nice cot.
Yeah, it's been done.
All right, I'm going to make a recommendation without objection that the other item regarding the high school be put on the February 12th agenda. And,
MOU?
excuse me?
The MOU or?
No, well, that's under this superintendent's agenda. We are going to hold off on that until the 12th.
Oh, the high school building
The
project.
high school,
Yes, 7D.
7D,
Discussion, yeah.
right. So I'm gonna put that on, take that off tonight, put it on the next agenda, and also, and then turn over the agenda to the superintendent for his remarks.
So I have only a few items, only gonna be about an hour.
It's not bad.
So in regard to general comments, I would like to say thank you to the Human Rights Commission for organizing and leading the MLK event on Monday. It was really an amazing community event where students presented, we had, choral arrangements, we had speeches. I think it was just really an uplifting event for all that were able to attend. And so I want to, again, thank you so much for that. So you heard from Principal McLeod on the program of studies. We will kind of be reporting back on that on February 12th after we have a parent meeting, just to follow up so that we can hear parental concerns and kind of how the change in ninth grade English might affect their children and how we might be able to best support their children, which is critically important. And so the kind of MOU has been tabled until February 12th. So in regard to our SEAM Collaborative Annual Report, that's part of the packet. So we are a member, there are 10 districts that are members of SEAM Collaborative. SEAM was established in 1968. They have 2 high school locations, 2 middle school locations, and 3 elementary school locations that serve just over 300 students from the 10 sending districts. And the districts that, including us, that send very few students to SEAM when we need help or support and don't have programs in district, and we want a very kind of high quality alternative for our students to kind of to get what they need. And so we have Wakefield students attending SEAM, and some on a short-term basis and some on a longer-term basis. But the collaborative has really allowed us to provide a least restrictive environment for our students, and also support them in a way that's really kind of economically responsible. And that's kind of one of the benefits of being in a 10-member collaborative. And so the annual report is in the packet. I don't know if anyone has any questions on it. The annual budget is there. Their annual audit is there. I, as the new superintendent here, am joining their board this year. So I'm a board member. And so I meet with them monthly to get updates on how their budget is progressing, how students are doing, and what new programs they're working on to best accommodate the emerging needs of students, not only in Wakefield, but other districts as well. I don't know if anyone has any questions on it. No? Great, thank you for that. Just in regard to an update on budget planning, and so we will be at FinCom on the 31st, and so Michael Pifferling, myself, and Kara Morrow, our assistant superintendent, have been meeting pretty much daily really kind of scouring our budget kind of line by line, really thinking about how we can creatively get what we need and what schools need, while also being fiscally prudent, fiscally responsible. And so we are collecting data. We've sent a survey out to members of our community and to teachers. To date, we've had about 350 responses to the survey, which we're pleased about. And it's pretty well balanced between parents and faculty and staff. So we're pleased about that as well. And the way the data is looking in regard to emerging needs from different stakeholders, I think that there is kind of a consensus that's developing that we definitely need counseling support at our schools K-12. There's kind of there's this emerging need, and kind of faculty and staff are reporting pretty clearly that they would also like to see more STEM opportunities around coding and engineering for children as well. And that is not, that's predominantly at the middle and high school levels. But we're still collecting data and we're still kind of chipping away. We're really trying to think about how we can reconstitute positions between just with the monies that we have to, again, really kind of drill down on this. It's also a negotiation year for us, so, and we just kicked off that last night with a dinner. So we're pleased that we're getting started with that as well. So that's where we are currently with the budget. I don't know if anyone has any questions on it, but the next time we'll kind of talk about this and present will be on the 31st.
So your meeting is on the 31st?
Correct.
Where is that?
Town Hall? Yeah. And so, just as a follow-up for the state of the schools, I'd like to thank everyone that was able to attend. We had probably about 50 to 60 people attend, which was kind of a higher number than we've had in the years past. So we appreciate everyone that was able to attend. Felt good about the conversation. We didn't kind of end it in a way that I thought we would or had in the past, and that's okay, but because I think really what took precedent is the conversation that was generated around what we're doing for our plan to really look at the high school. And so, which kind of brings me to a conversation that I had. Did you bring this up earlier in regard to putting together a group? Did you bring that up?
No,
Okay.
we're holding that until the next meeting.
Okay.
7D is on the next meeting.
So more to follow on kind of the state of the schools and where we are with the MSBA. I'll report more in our next meeting, but that's it from me. I don't know if anyone has any questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, very good, thank you. Budget items, number 9, Mr. Piffling.
I will be very brief. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today, the governor's budget came out for FY20. It's first crack at the budget. I have cherry sheets up here. I will hand them out after the meeting. I don't want to get too in-depth with it. It starts to go through the Senate and the House and Ways and Means, and it's a long process, but the initial cherry sheet figures are out from the governor. Wakefield, at this time, looks like our Chapter 70 number is going up about $300,000, which is about 4.8%. There are always offsets and charter school tuitions and school choice tuitions that offset some of that, but the Chapter 70 number right now is at the governor's prediction or recommendation is about $302,000. So just wanted to share that brief bit of news. I will certainly provide more information. They just came out today and I didn't have time to get it ready for the packet, but just wanted to share that's there. I am going to really breeze over the monthly reports. They're actually almost stagnant now. We'll have another set next week.
Well,
So
these are December 31 numbers, right?
yeah, correct. So we're just going to kind of skip over those and go right to payroll warrants, if that's all right?
Sure.
Unless anybody has any questions on the reports that were in the packet?
Well, we've now seen this.
Two times, right, because they were in the last packet
Anyone
also.
have any budget questions for Mike, year to date? Okay, great. The payroll warrant, we have a motion. Mr. Callahan.
The school committee approved payroll warrants 24 and 26 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions? All in favor? Opposed? Passes unanimously. Mr. Callahan, gifts.
Gifts, okay, so move the school committee accept with gratitude the donation of $100 from Luda's Environmental Inc., Lawn Care and Plant Company. This gift is for the school department to use as it deems appropriate.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Any questions?
Just
Seeing
that-
none, all in favor? Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Move the school committee accept with gratitude the donation of $3,200 from Cassette Inc. for the purchase of textbooks and instructional materials.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions? All in favor? Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Just so people know, it's the Italian program, right? So, and move the school committee accept with gratitude the donation of $1,000 from Cummings Property of Woburn through the employee-directed giving program to purchase new uniforms for the boys' JV soccer team. The gift is in honor of and the recommendation of Derek Russell of 67 West Park Drive.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions? All in favor? Opposed? Passes unanimously. And are we all set?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Subcommittee reports. Finance and Facilities, Mr. Liakos is not with us tonight. Are any of these, any substantially different than the minutes we have in our packets that we've accepted tonight?
Nope.
Have there been meetings since the minutes? Okay, well, my recommendation would be that we dispense with subcommittee reports having the capacity to read the minutes. Is that fair? Okay. Future dates and agenda items, our next meeting, which is already getting full, Tuesday, February 12th, 2 weeks from this evening. Any agenda items that committee members would like to see on that agenda, other than obviously what we've already talked about? Seeing none, okay, very good. Going around the table, school committee comments. Anyone like to volunteer to go first? I was reminded by a member of the community that earlier I said I made some remark that I was going to come up with some clever way to do this, which I've apparently not done, but I was reminded that I've not come up with a clever way yet. So we're going to have to draw straws or something there.
The popsicle sticks.
Popsicle
We'll have
sticks.
to come up with something different in the winter.
Okay. So in the meantime, Amy, can you bail me out and
Yes,
just
of
go?
course, I will begin, and just obviously want to thank the public for coming here tonight. We had a great meeting, very informative. I want to thank Amy and AJ for coming here and explaining this new process that may happen, and I do think that it did help, and hopefully it answered a lot of questions for the parents. And to the Wakefield High School girls softball team, you're amazing and awesome, and I'm so impressed with how well you communicate to people, and we really hope that this happens for you and you get the support you need to have the field.
Great. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Ann?
Well, I also want to, I'm just very happy that AJ and Amy came and talked about the English, the ninth grade class, really informative and thoughtful. And also, I also want to really congratulate the softball, the boosters, the parents, and especially the students. They were here forever. They waited, and it was very impressive, and they are incredibly well-spoken. So I know that they have a lot of support in the community, and we'll hopefully show our support as well.
Chris?
I agree with what they said. I have nothing new to add.
Okay. RJ?
Yeah, I agree too. They got really big hearts because they're coming down here. They know that they're not getting the new field, but they're looking to inspire a new generation. So that's really cool.
Indeed, you're right. Colleen?
Well said. Yes, ditto. And I think it just speaks to sort of the student engagement, both conversations, just the focus on student participation and the engagement that we saw with the high school students. It's just the confidence and the way that they can speak it's all a product of, obviously, parents and environment, but what we're providing in education. So it was really cool that we ended that way.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah.
Or they ended that way. We had nothing to do with that, so.
That's right. Amen. Yeah, no, that's very, very true. Students at the heart of the process. One thing that I would like to just add on to what the superintendent mentioned earlier when congratulating the Human Rights Commission on a really outstanding Martin Luther King Day celebration. But a special congratulations that a Martin Luther King Service Award was presented to the Gay Student Alliance, Gay Straight Alliance. Then they certainly were well deserving of this award, and I was pleased on behalf of all of us to be able to award that to them. But certainly the remarkable work that they do in representing the interests of so many of our kids and being so welcome and being so opening. It was really a pleasure to be able to represent you and be able to read the types of things that this group of kids is doing for themselves and for the larger community. It's quite inspiring. But anyways, congratulations to the Gay Straight Alliance for their Martin Luther King Service Award. Also, the Human Rights Commission announced the first William Chetwynd Founders Award, which was presented to the Chetwynd family, which was also very, very inspiring to hear. Obviously, we all know the work of Mr. Chetwynd over the years, a member of this committee for many, many years, and just really lifeblood of the town. But we'll look forward to future award recipients for the Chetwynd Founders Award. So just a really nice day. Okay, motion to adjourn. Mr. Callahan.
Well, the school committee adjourned its meeting of Wednesday, January 23rd, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Passing unanimously. Good night, all. Good night. Pleasure.